missing just one council member. I expect will be joining us soon, but we'll go ahead and begin. It's Tuesday, June 16th at 1:30 p.m. We're convened in the City Center Conference Room. And we'll begin with a roll call. Corey?
Corey Norman.
Wayne Parker.
Gary Winterton.
Hal Miller.
Dave Sewell.
Howie Hales.
Kim Santiago.
Gary Garrett?
Louise Jurgensen.
Okay.
Matt
And
Taylor.
Matt
And Brian Jones.
and
We're here.
are here also. Great. We've invited Stan Andresen, the fire captain, to begin our meeting with a word of prayer.
Mr. Chair, before
Yes.
we start, Mayor Curtis received some bad news today, and I think it would be good for maybe in the prayer. He lost his father today, and I would like to, that's why he's not here, and I think it might be nice in our prayer to recognize him and his family.
I appreciate knowing that. Thank you. I wasn't aware. Thank you, Mr. Winterton, and that'd be great. Captain Andresen, if you could do that.
Our Father in heaven, as we meet, we would like to give thee thanks for all the many blessings thou hast bestowed upon us. We're grateful for this land we live in and the freedoms we have. We're thankful for the military and those who protect our freedoms. We're grateful for the knowledge that we have of thee and thy blessings upon us. We ask that thou bless those that are in leadership positions, that they can lead in righteousness and make good choices, not only for our country, but those leaders of Provo City. We ask a special blessing this time on the Curtis family as they are going through a difficult time, that thou would bless them, that they can feel peace and comfort. And these favors and blessings we ask in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Captain. How long have you been with the force?
16 years.
16 years. All here in Provo?
Yes. I also work part-time Pleasant Grove.
Great. Well, we appreciate becoming acquainted with you and your service here today. Anyone have any questions for Captain Andresen?
So I think what I was supposed to do is just tell a little bit about what we do.
Yeah,
Take
that'd be great.
a couple minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So as a fire service, we don't just fight fires. Probably about 85% of what we do is medical calls, and we also cover hazmat, traffic accidents. You know, when somebody has an emergency, they call 911, and if it's not the police, it's usually us. And so there's a lot of different types of calls we respond to. For example, last night at about midnight exactly, we helped deliver a 32-week-old little baby boy. So that was quite exciting.
At his home or on the road? Or?
At home.
Mm-hmm.
Both mom and baby are doing well. We got them to the hospital. So, that's just some of what we do. Like I say, fight fires, do medical calls. During the daytime, we'll have school groups, and people come by for tours, do, fire prevention, public education. Part of our job, a lot of times people will see the fire trucks at the rec center. Twice a year, we are tested on our physical fitness in the spring and in the fall. And I think we have a little video, just a short clip, and we'll just play that. And then if you guys have any questions,
Great.
If not, we'll be done.
Yeah, great.
You would turn the light off.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Thank you, Sam Armstrong, for his. He put this together.
There's a little longer version of this that I have at home. This is just kind of the trailer version that I made.
And is this online, or how do you use it for training?
I'm not sure if I put this on the website or not.
Uh-huh.
I haven't seen this yet, so.
We have feedback then. Oh, okay.
It's just a little demonstration.
Can we go full screen on that?
So that's a 180-pound dummy that we have to drag 100 feet in full turnouts and on air.
Thank you.
So the drill starts, you pick up a 40-pound hose roll, you hike to the top of our tower at Station 3, 5 stories, drop that hose roll, pull another hose from the bottom all the way up, hand over hand, go down the stairs, there's a Kaiser sled, which I think is 180 pounds, and you have to hit that sledgehammer 5 feet, and then you walk around some cones and pick up 100 feet of charged hose line, drag that 100 feet, set that down, as you saw him show the water, and then you walk over, pick up a 180-pound dummy, and drag him, and then your time's up. And you have 7 minutes to do that. And most of us do it right around 3.5 minutes.
And that's an annual
Yeah.
test that you, certification.
So, you guys have any questions? We're more than happy to answer them. Or?
Wise to be surrounded by medical personnel.
Yeah, and as you can see there's a lot of guys, I mean, we're supporting each other, cheering each other on. You know, we try to be safe, but in the past we've had a person or two have to get medical treatment during that, and it's pretty exhausting.
Is what you did last night, you had your midwifery training?
No, we learned how to deliver babies in paramedic school, and actually one of the medics we happened to have on scene, he said that was like his 15th baby. So he's got the luck. 'Cause in 16 years, I think I've been on 6 or 7. And he's only been on what, 7 years?
Thank you. I've had a few people a little concerned about range fires in our city, you know, especially on the north end of the city. What do we do about some of those? Some of this is it's on private property. Are there things that we need to be doing to help prevent those type of fires? We had one on University Avenue that kind of went up. That feels pretty steep last year, and I had a few neighbors that were all of a sudden pretty concerned when they saw that fire last year, and they want to know what we should do this year. What on private property, it's a challenge.
That's a great question because, you know, as citizens of Provo, we should take care of our own properties. Sometimes our neighbors, you know, may not be taking care of those. But if you have a concern and it's next to your property or other neighbors, we do have fire prevention. We have a fire marshal, 2 deputy fire marshals, and that's part of their job is to go out and assess those and enforce that. People, you know, have the responsibility. I know there's a lot of times people live out of state, even on property here. But there's ways to contact them, and they are responsible for keeping the, you know, foliage down so it doesn't create a problem. The other thing is a lot of times people live near, you know, the foothills or those ravines where there's, you know, the scrub oak and the brush, and that's all, you know, nice to have because it's pretty, but those can also be hazards, especially, you know, in the area you mentioned. So, you know, just trying to keep a secure area around your house is key. And then, you know, if it starts to get really dry, like I say, get a hold of the fire marshal's office.
And if they have concerns, should they be contacting you? Should they be contacting, who should they contact?
Yeah, just call the main office and they'll put them in touch with probably the fire marshal, which is Lynn Schofield or Brad Adams.
It sounds like if most of your staff pass this exercise in 3 or 4 minutes, there's quite a distance between that and not passing. But if they were to fail, are they given other duties until they pass? Is that how that works?
Yes, and that's a great question. There are those, and I don't know how many are left, but this test, there were those who were hired after, and so they were not required to meet that. I know when we hired on, we've got to maintain that standard. We do have a couple that are in the process of, you know, getting fit for duty.
Right.
So yeah, it's not like they're all of a sudden you're let go if you don't pass it.
Yeah.
They're encouraged
Go through
to.
a
We have
process.
actually a fitness team that works with them, you know, on exercise and diet and those type of things.
Yeah. Great. Any other questions?
So when we have a wildfire, you're the first responders, or do you have other people come to help with things like that? Like years ago, there was a fire on Y Mountain, And I know I watched the guys just make a line right up the mountain, trudge straight up the hill, and kind of put up a human wall for a while there. Is that Provo City Fire doing that initially? Is that a cooperative?
It is a cooperative effort, and that's a great question because part of our certification is we have to be red card certified, which is wildland firefighter cert. But honestly, our expertise is in structural and home protection and medical. Even though we're trained in the other, we'll call in the Forest Service, and Utah County has a wildland group. So it's a combined effort. We've had several fires along the foothills, and a lot of times we'll call those guys in because they're, that's kind of their expertise. And if we commit all our resources to the mountains, then who's protecting Provo City? So.
Some of the good things that we do have, we're closer than Utah County is. They're down in Spanish Fork, and then the Forest Service also has crews here in the county. But when there's initial call out right in the foothills, just past the property line of residential structures, we'll usually make the initial attack. And for that, we have all of our big apparatus, but they don't move through the foothills very well. So Station 2 up by the stadium, Station 5 down on 7th East and 300 South. And then Station 4, because we have problems out in the reeds and out by the lake as well. We all have what are called brush trucks or brush apparatus. They have 300 gallons of water, and they can move in four-wheel drive in a much smaller truck, like a pickup truck with a bed on the back. And they have deployable hose lines that can pump and spray while they're moving around. And then we do a lot of shovel work as well, digging fire line and stop. But we'll start the fire attack and then bring in either the Forest Service or Utah County to support or take it from there so that we can back up and protect the residential structures.
Thank you.
Well, thanks to both of you. Appreciate your service to our city and your participation with us here today. Very interesting and helpful to us. Thank you, Captain.
Thank you. And on that, if you've got anything else,
Yes.
we've got another training we got here in a half hour. So
That sounds great. Thank you. Would you hit the lights there on your way out, Captain? Thank you.
you guys don't want to fall asleep?
All right. We're pleased to have our Sustainability Committee member, Don Jarvis, with us today. I know we've put you off a couple of meetings, Don, so we're grateful and anxious to have your report today, an update on progress you're making and current initiatives of your group.
I'm just a member.
That's what I thought. Are you the chair? Thank you.
We do have a member here as well.
Okay.
Rachel.
Yes, Rachel.
It's, I didn't mind being put off a bit. I've been down in Brazil the last 3 weeks, and it's good to get back to some place that's warm. And it's winter in Brazil. First, I'd like to report on our activities and then have some policy discussions with you. We have I have 15 copies of what I'd like to discuss with you going around, and lots of copies of the recycling pamphlet. I'd like to talk about policy things with you, and then see if you have some recommendations for the sustainability committee. But it should be a two-way street here, and we'd be happy to work on what you'd like us to work on. First thing I'd like to report on, I remember doing a resolution on the Tier 3 fuels last year. The Chamber of Commerce also did that, and the Utah County Clean Air Task Force, which is a feature of the Chamber of Commerce, we all sent resolutions to the legislature. And you think, well, it's like throwing something over the wall. Does anything ever get received? Well, the good news is that it appears to have been received because Senate Bill 216 supports production of Tier 3 fuels, which are the low sulfur fuels, which will dramatically decrease pollution from vehicles. And Utah County legislators uncharacteristically support it. Utah County legislators, if you follow them, tend to vote against most environmental measures. but they supported this one very heavily, and we're delighted. And I think that your resolution was not inconsequential in that. You should have a copy of the recycling brochure going around. We finally got this out in hard copy with the mayor's letter supporting it, mailed to all the significant sized rental agencies in Provo, and we hope that will increase recycling in Provo. The committee doesn't usually, we haven't done as much as the mayor would like us to do on community outreach, but we're starting to do a little better job of that. We had a booth at the Provo Spring Festival that helped publicize city policies on sustainability, and Rachel Whipple, who's here, she knows how to attract kids, and if you attract kids, you can get their parents. We had a crowd around our booth almost the entire afternoon at the Spring Festival, publicizing city policies on sustainability, and true, we can get the word out.
Don, I've got a question.
Sure, Gary.
About, had a couple of people contact, we don't do anything commercially for recycling.
Explain what you mean by that.
I don't see any dumpsters for commercial recycling, or are those things that we don't really haven't done.
We could do better on that, that's for sure. There are
Are there some?
Well, there certainly are. Any commercial unit or business can contract with the public or with a new group called Recyclops, or with let's see, some others. Anyway, any of the commercial waste haulers will also handle commercial buildings, commercial units, but the city hasn't pushed them or required commercial people to do it, and there might be some reason to think about that. This is the nearest thing to commercial. We're talking about high-density housing, and this is a huge area. As you know, something like half of Provo's residents live in rented housing. So to get this out, to get high-density housing, thinking about recycling is, I think, a huge step, and I appreciate the city helping to fund this. Whether it'll make a difference, I don't know, but we hope so.
So I just had somebody contact me yesterday from the Riverwoods area, and said, "What do we do?" And I did. That's what I referred them to the private company.
Yeah, that's
all we do at this point.
Yeah. Now for commercial real estate, you know, if some landlord has a multi-family unit, and he'd like to have the city pick it up, they can put out as many blue cans as they want, as long as they wheel them out to the curb. The city now picks them up. They didn't used to. They used to have a limit of 4 plexes, and now they'll step up. Thanks for that question.
On my
Yes.
recalling incorrectly, it seems to me that a year or more ago, the Sustainability Committee partnered with Downtown Provo Inc. to encourage recycling by downtown merchants.
I wish your memory was correct, but I don't remember doing it anyway. I don't think we did. We need to work more closely with Downtown Provo Inc. because what we did do is encourage them to think about something else. I need to think about what that was that we talked to them about doing. We need to work with Downtown Provo Inc. more. Okay. We're working hard on agricultural land provision, preservation. As you know, Utah County has some of the best high-quality soil in the whole state of Utah. And we have some of the best climate for fruit and vegetable raising. And Utah County used to be self-sufficient in fruits and vegetables a long time ago. But we're losing our agricultural land to urban sprawl. And many of our agricultural refugees from Orem and Provo have moved down to South County, and now they're being threatened down there in South County, except for the city of Santa Quin, which is, they have all those agricultural refugees, and they have the political will to set in place some policies which are absolutely marvelous for protecting agricultural land. But we're working with the county commission open a visioning process for the whole county, and it turns out the Nature Conservancy has about $50,000, which they're planning on donating to the Provo Foundation to support a visioning process for preserving open space in the county and the city. Now, we know, Brian, that we can't tell them how they use the money, but we think that the track record is pretty good on doing what the donors would like without tying the hands of the Provo Foundation. But we hope that this will provide political backing for you and for other government agencies to protect some agricultural land, because as you know, it ain't easy. There's enormous forces, and you can't blame the developers. It's people want to do these sort of things, and they're just answering what the market wants. But anyway, I think getting Envision Utah involved here will be very helpful. They're in the process of raising money, and they're very interested in this $50,000, which Provo will have to help them with this. We also, you probably know that the Energy Department is going to install some electric vehicle charging stations in the new parking lot. And I told Scott Bunter about Leaders for Clean Air, which provides free electric vehicle charging stations as long as the entity does the installation. And so Scott is looking into that with them. Now, as far as any questions about any of those activities? Okay. Now, some time ago, we talked about a zoning summit, and there was some question as to whether that was really necessary. I understand you've had some talk with Bill Pepperoni since that indicates that we really probably do need to talk about big issues on zoning still. And so I'd like to heartily urge the council to seriously consider holding a zoning summit to discuss broad policies on zoning reform. Because as you know, the consensus from Bill and the other people in the planning unit is that you can't do it piecemeal by just doing individual neighborhood planning. That helps, that's in the right direction, but you need to do overall zoning summit. At least to some consensus as to how to do it. Now, this next one will probably not be popular, but the Sustainability Committee this morning decided they'd recommend, we know all the problems with this, that Provo City joined 55 other Utah cities in requesting the County Commission to put a 1/4-cent sales tax increase on the November ballot. This is, of course, as you know, was made legal by the legislature this year, and a lot of cities are requesting this be on the ballot. Whether they'll all pass or not is probably doubtful, but we suggest that this be done. We know there's lots of other things going on that the voters will be grumpy about increases, but some time ago, many of us in the Sustainability Committee and the Biking Committee and others involved with Provo City Transportation had a chance to visit Boulder, Colorado, and we wondered what was the secret of their marvelous transportation system and their biking and walkways and things. They said, well, it was a 3/4-cent sales tax increase 10 years ago. Now, this isn't a 3/4 sales tax increase, to talk about a 1/4, and it wouldn't all just go for biking and walking. But I think we need to think about that to improve transportation infrastructure and take some pressure off you if we had a little more income. Councilwoman Stewart, are you thinking about making a comment on this one? Okay. I thought I saw her hand go up, but maybe.
What's that?
Any response on that one? Is it just too hard to think about?
We believe in what you're talking about, and that's one of the main reasons that we instituted the Utility Transportation Fund.
So you're trying to say you don't need the sales
No,
tax?
I'm not saying we don't need that. But what I am saying that we do need to be sensitive to what we've already done.
Yeah.
and the directions that we're going,
Yeah.
because I'm not sure that this still isn't something, and we're looking at what the county's going to be doing as we go.
I don't know what the deadline for getting it on the ballot is, but it probably isn't too far off. It's already June,
The end of August.
end of August, so we have a little time, but anyway, but Orem and Pleasant Grove have done it. And of course, they have serious problems, but also most cities do with transportation infrastructure. And that's part of the reason the legislature passed it. Is that everybody's got the same dang problems. Now, this last suggestion is on recycling. We know that you have approved a plan to for Provo to take on blue can recycling, which is not going to be without some expense. But we think there's a whole lot of new information that needs to be considered, and for both blue can and green can recycling. Are we aware of some of the things that are coming down the pike that are changes on this? For one thing, I guess you know that the green can recycling with South Utah County Solid Waste District, that's in jeopardy right now, right? And so, what do we do about a new green can recycling program if we can afford it? That's problematic. So if you try to put out a policy right now with the prices, it's all figured out with what we've got right now, we think you're going to be in trouble. So we think it might be wise for you to suggest that Public Works go back and renegotiate with Republic Services to extend their contract for another year while we're going through all the issues that are in front of us for prices of recycling, both for blue can and green can. Does that make any sense? Do you want to make any comments on that?
I just have a question. What is the challenge with the green can? Is it just that the cost?
Or Solid Waste District Board voted recently to stop composting effective the first of the new calendar year. And so, again, member cities are going to have to look for alternatives. But it was a cost factor. It's losing $1 million a year and was being heavily subsidized by the residential waste collection. And it just wasn't sustainable anymore. So again, we've asked our Public Works Department to evaluate alternatives and define what they're doing. I can tell you Spanish Fork is they're going to grind their green waste, what they can use as essentially green mulch, not compost. What they can use or sell, they will use and sell, and the rest of it they'll take to the landfill. And so there's a variety of options and alternatives available. We are planning to come to you at your next meeting with a comprehensive update on the solid waste district and kind of where it stands and a variety of factors, and that's one of them. So we are exploring other alternatives, and one of those might be to contract with the district. So again, we'll just have to see how that goes, but they've put their member cities on notice that by the end of the calendar year they will be out of the business.
Makes me sad. I love that compost.
It's very popular.
You get there every year.
It is.
It's going to be a challenge.
You love it enough to pay twice what you don't pay.
I don't know if I do that. It's hard to see how much the bags are now. It's been so convenient. It's so nice to be able to use that, and I would miss that.
And if we don't have a green can waste, then it's going to go into black cans, and it's going to increase our tipping fees, and so it's one of these things that has cost both ways. So I think it's going to take some hard thinking. Councilman Sewell, do you have anything to add on this?
Well, it seems to me the suggestion is that since a pretty significant chunk of our program is kind of up in the air right now, that the suggestion that maybe this wasn't the best time to break off the Republic contract and make the big capital investment to buy what we can.
Should mention, we have extended the Republic contract through the month of October, so our cutover won't be until November 1, which again, I think will give us some time to try to assess exactly what happens there. There are changes in the recycling world. I think we mentioned to you the secondary market, bottom's falling out of the secondary market. And so the solid waste district, which has been collecting the recycling, historically has hauled it to Salt Lake, been paid for the recyclables, and then they've picked up a load of recycled waste, which is not recyclable, the pizza boxes that have oil on them, which can't be recycled, then the district hauls that back and puts it into the municipal solid waste stream. So they've been making money on both ends of the spectrum and more than covered their transportation costs. But now that we actually have to pay to drop recycling at the facility in Salt Lake City, where again that's become a cost factor, not a revenue factor now. And so again we will be evaluating that service as well. And so again that may argue for contracting with another entity besides the solid waste district. It may argue for the private sector to build a facility in Utah County that would minimize transportation costs. There's a whole host of things that could happen. But again, I think those exist in the recycling world regardless of who manages our pickup and disposal. I mean, if the tipping fee increases, that gets passed through to us. If transportation costs increase, that gets passed through to us. And so I don't know that there's any particular advantage to delaying a year. Certainly it's a good thing to try to figure out exactly how we're going to operate it. But we think, again, that can be figured out before the cutover date in November.
So one more comment then. It sounds like we have a little flexibility there as to how long we extend the contract. I guess I would like to suggest if the administration is amenable that we, before we make the capital investment for all the new cans, kind of keep that option on the table to maybe extend it longer.
Under any scenario, the ownership of the cans doesn't define who picks them up, and it defines who maintains the cans, but it doesn't define who picks them up and disposes of the contents. And in fact, a number of cities that privatize their recycling pickup already own their own cans, and that gives them the ability to truly have an apples-to-apples comparison when they go out to bid. There's no capital investment other than trucks for a potential recycling contractor. So I don't think it changes the dynamic of, the fact that we own the cans and maintain them doesn't change the dynamic of who collects them. At any point in time, you could make that decision to switch back or to extend. So I don't think, again, we haven't foreclosed any options by owning our own cans.
There's one other factor to consider, thinking really long-term here. There's some really nice things you can do with incentives if you have a couple of different sizes cans, so you can charge a different rate. So that's one potential reason for maybe not committing right away to that. Although there's an alternative approach which accomplishes the same objective, going by weight,
right?
But I'm not sure how reliable that is.
Yeah, the technology is not quite there.
So,
but it is getting close.
So the Sustainability Committee would like to not have people penalized for recycling if you can do it without breaking the city budget. I'd like to have them have it be an advantage to recycle, or not at least not have an extra cost for recycling. I know that's not easy to do, but we're looking in that direction and sure.
One question for you, Don. If we're not able to take a different approach with a more comprehensive approach, could you comment on the option B also as a fallback that we talked about?
You mean on the postponing for a year?
No, the just raising the black can price instead of raising the blue can price.
Yeah, that's basically what many other cities do. They just charge fairly heavily for your general garbage, and the cost for picking up general garbage then recycles, then subsidizes recycling. And you can have either one size can or three size cans, and then with 2 or 3 size cans, people are rewarded for throwing away less into the landfill, which costs the city, and putting more into recycling, which we hope won't cost the city. But it knows that that ain't easy either.
It's a cyclical market. So.
Yeah. Before I leave, what would you like the Sustainability Committee to work on? What are we not doing that we should be doing from your point of view? We've got a lot of things that people tell us we ought to be doing. we want to do what you want us to do.
What kinds of projects are out there that you see, Don, you and your committee members, that you would identify as priorities?
I just talked about them.
Those, okay.
So we're still doing air quality stuff.
Okay.
We do a huge project. And oh, by the way, we also think we'd like to do a Clean Air Challenge again this year, which you approved as a city project last year. We'd like to do that again. We do every year with the public schools. We get every single student in public schools is informed about what their family could do to reduce pollution. We want to. We're heavily involved in recycling. We want to do work on agricultural land preservation. I think it'd be a terrible tragedy if all our local beaches were somehow out of reach totally. We still have a fair number of tart cherries, but they will go too. So we're working on agricultural land preservation, and we'd love to have more with that. We'd love to do more with e-vehicle charging stations, but that with this fact that this Leaders for Clean Air is providing them free of charge to those who will install them, and kind of pay it forward to help other people do it. I think this is really fun.
There's the Idle Free campaign that you've been working on.
Indeed. Yeah, that, when I say air pollution, that
Includes that.
definitely part of that. So,
Well, thank you, Don. We appreciate the report and update, and commend you and your committee members for great work.
thank you. Lisa, I'll send you an electronic copy.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Don. Inasmuch as we have several members of our budget committee here at this time, we'd like to move to item 5 and do discussion, presentation, update on that. And that will be presented by Chair Member, by Council Member Santiago. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Ryan in the back, blue shirt on, he'll load that.
Thank you, Chair Garrett, for the opportunity to talk about these guiding principles. These should all be very well versed in guiding principles by now. We've had multiple discussions and had revisions, and I feel like we have an easier to read version and a more cohesive version, which is often the case when it goes through this kind of review. So you each have a copy in front of you. There was a copy downloaded on our public documents that many of you probably have been able to look at previously. When we originally came out with the copy of the guiding principles, the mayor and administration gave some recommendations. Those are in our documents as well, and the recommendations that they made were in red. And I believe we have been able to meet most of those recommendations, if not all. The questions at the end of that presentation, in the body of the guiding principles are addressed. And if not, those are questions that we can ask as we do review the fees. It's my understanding that the administration has the first 25 fees available and ready for our review. And so the next step would be to review these guiding principles and then revise if we need to, and adopt these so that we all have the same goals moving forward. I felt like as a council it would be helpful to have the same vision, same goals as we address the fees, to be on the same page and be able to move through this evaluation a little easier and just have a better understanding of what we're trying to achieve as a whole. So I don't know if there are any that feel like it would be valuable to go through the document, or if you just want to discuss parts of it. It might be helpful also to have Mr. Sewell describe some of the changes that have been made most recently. A lot of that is for clarification. I know we met with Mr. Harding and also with Mr. Walker from our budget committee, and we're able to clarify some things. And as a budget committee, we met and looked over some of these clarifications, and we're able to come up with this document that we really feel confident in is something that can really help us through our fee discussions in the coming years. So if you have questions, if you feel like it would be helpful to go through the document, we can put it up here as well. What are your thoughts? Or we just have Mr. Sewell come up and talk about some of the...
I'm anxious to see the document move to the final approval by the council. I don't know whether the draft dated June 3rd considers what our staff provided us. I didn't see evidence that it did.
Our intent was to go over some of those talking points that we provided to you, if that was your desire, after Ms. Lampe had the opportunity.
It strikes me that it would be easy enough to simply add what the staff has recommended to the draft that we have now from the budget committee. Do that by means of different coloration. We're used to that practice. And then to allow each member of the council a chance to read the draft with the infolding of the staff's recommended changes. And each member of the council could then either say, looks good to me, or here's what I suggest instead, so that by the time we meet next, we can have a final.
I'd be happy to accommodate that.
Are there, I wonder if there are enough substantive changes that would necessitate, sorry, I'm trying to get these words out, the moving it to yet another meeting, or if we couldn't just go through the document, go through those changes, and see where we're at then. And if we feel like that's not adequate, then move it to another meeting, since we have the budget committee here again. And
Well, we have roughly 45 minutes for this agenda item, so we can certainly go down that road and see.
So would you like to talk about some of the changes that have been made, and then we'll have the staff talk about their recommendations, and if there are recommendations that the council feel that we should add from what the staff has presented, then we'll go from there. Does that sound like a good way to proceed?
Sure.
Okay.
Do you want me to go up there or just talk from here?
Either way.
Okay. Well, I guess I'm kind of used to talking from here, so that's okay. So I think we had a couple of objectives as we looked at it. We wanted to improve clarity and make it a little bit shorter, so actually the word count went down a little bit. And there were a couple of substantive things that we were hoping to accomplish with our suggestions to the budget committee. And one is, I guess, kind of putting this in an overall context that the purpose isn't always just to recover costs, because there's often community benefit involved in things that we do, and so there are legitimate cases where subsidy of a particular service is warranted, and so we just kind of couch the purpose a little bit differently to take that into account. I think that's kind of a summary of what we're hoping to accomplish. Are there any specific questions? Should we move on to the steps? Recommendations?
Please move on to staff if you wanted to talk about. Are those in public documents, your recommendations?
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm trying to prepare the document, but he'll lead us in this discussion. We're characterizing our feedback as alternatives to consider.
rather than specific recommendations.
Okay. All right. Thank you, council. Working. All right, we'll kind of return to these policy questions at the end. They're kind of that are throughout the report as well, in the different alternatives. The main policy from Vision 2030, create and maintain a balanced and sustainable financial plans and government budgets that keep taxes and utility rates and utility fair and competitive, and still maintaining quality services and cost-effective management of our community's infrastructure. So I'll just kind of go through some of the alternative language and maybe some other concerns that staff has had. The third bullet, or the second bullet point of the guiding principles, it's kind of, and then there's sub-bullet points and there's more sub-bullet points. So I said 2-3-2, it says should be set aside annually in a designated capital maintenance fund. We've had a lot of discussion about what, terminology, and so it may be beneficial to say capital upgrade/replacement fund. That's what we've been calling it, these maintenance instead of maintenance, calling it replacement/upgrade. That's what we did when we were talking about the RAP tax as well, so just to be consistent there. The second thing of just a language change, and this is actually a suggestion that the administration had when they reviewed the document a couple months ago. But if you go to bullet point number 7, so it's the second to last bullet point on the first page, it says user fees should be adjusted annually when warranted to reflect significant changes in operating costs. The suggestion that the administration had, staff also thought was valid. It would be in addition to considering the impact to customers and revenues, rather than solely relying on if operating costs go up, having those other two factors in there as well. The third one that we thought you could consider is on bullet point number 10, so it's on the second page. And it's the last bullet point. Let's see. Yeah, last bullet point before strategy.
Louis Jorgensen. The issue with your car outside. I don't know if it's something you can address now.
Somebody crashed into it.
Will
you take notes?
So sorry, Louise. Not so bad.
So we only called me.
Any news? Maybe if you can take minutes?
Let me write down since you.
Okay, continue.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's the last bullet point before strategy. It says the amount and structure of user fees should be aligned with the community benefit from providing the service. If you read our note about that, the word outcome seems to be more in line with the policy governance model that the council has adopted. If we think about the outcome of the user fee, then it may help you better provide account for the structure. It talks about the amount and structure. If you define what the purpose is or the outcome, then we think that you'd be able to determine the amount and structure more easily. So that was a suggestion we had. So those are the three language differences. The next one is the funding source language, and this one is in. If you look at the last bullet point on the first page, it says, where user fees are insufficient to fully recover costs for a service, the administration will be asked to estimate the shortfall, and the council, in consultation with the administration, will identify an alternative source to fill the gap.
The concern that we see that could happen here is, are we filling the gap with other sources of revenue? So there's a fee. We see that there's a gap, and so the council decides to fill that gap with an alternative funding source. Well, right now that gap's being filled with just general fund revenue, right? And so now we'll have a surplus if we're filling the gap with the gap that has been filled with general fund monies. We have a surplus. So does that result in now we're going to lower taxes, or what does that result in? And so we thought maybe some more clarification on that language.
And I understand that, but I don't see where the surplus is if we're already doing it.
So say that you decide, you know, the recreation center, we have a shortfall of $100,000, right? So now the council, this is saying the council is going to determine where that $100,000 is coming from. Right now, the $100,000 is just coming from the general fund, right? That's how we're funding it, because we have to have a balanced budget. So if we decide, okay, so that's the question with this language. Are we saying that, okay, we're going to raise an extra $100,000 from some other source? Now all of a sudden we have an extra $100,000 in the general fund. Does that mean we're going to lower taxes, or are we going to reallocate those funds? It's unclear about. One of the potential problems that we see is, are you going to assign every dollar of the general, or are you just going to say it's coming from the general fund, because that's already what it's doing? So it's just a little unclear there. Did Ryan answer your question?
Well, and I think I understand that, but I just see that we're already doing that.
Well,
that's what we're
it
doing.
depends on how you want to subsidize. Oh, well, sorry. It depends on what issue. So let's take a scenario. If you have, say, youth soccer, and you decide for some reason maybe youth soccer should not be subsidized. Okay, the policy as it states says that you will determine a revenue to fill that the gap that's currently existing, right?
Okay.
So you raise fees to cover that cost. Then we have surplus funds. Where do you put those surplus funds?
Well, I don't see that it says that we raise fees. Well, I guess if we
If you
made this
decide
policy.
that there should be no subsidy, you would raise the fee so the user pays. Then then that's the question. Now that you've raised the fee to cover that gap, because you for some reason believe the individual should cover the cost, now you have a surplus in revenue, in alternative revenue, general fund revenue, wherever that comes from. What will you do with that revenue? Will you allocate it to other priorities, or will you reduce taxes? I mean, there are two alternatives. Well, but what this point is saying is, if there is a shortfall, and we're going to say that we're not going to raise fees to cover the gap, that the council needs to determine where that shortfall is going to be paid for, right? Right now, that shortfall is just being paid for by the general fund. So it's unclear why does the council have to determine where that shortfall is coming from when it's already coming from the general fund. And if the council is saying that, or if the guiding principles are saying that we need to find an alternative revenue source, then that alternative revenue source will fill in that gap, and then we'll have a surplus in the general fund that's currently filling the gap.
Unless you just have more money in the general fund to use for whatever purpose the council decides to use it for.
And that's what we're asking. We're asking, so are we saying that we're just gonna, so we're finding an alternative revenue so that we can just have now more money? And what are we gonna do with that more money, right?
I think that's the reason why we wanted to have all of the consolidated fees, or all the fees done at once, because it's a lot easier to know what we have and where to allocate it once it's all of those things have done. And I think in these guiding principles we say that in the end, that once we do know exactly what we're dealing with all 300 fees, then we have a better sense of where it needs to go, right? To do it individually is not real feasible. Like,
Right.
And
maybe-
so,
I guess
and so
that's
you
the
talk about a
concern,
surplus,
right?
but it's not really a surplus because there's so many other needs that might be true needs, and that it would go to cover some of those things, right? I'm seeing it as a reallocation. It's not going to be like we have all this extra money. It's going to be a reallocation to the things that we actually have real needs that we're subsidizing right now.
Right.
And so if you're looking at it very small at one fee, then yeah, then it seems like we have the surplus because we're not taking it from the general fund anymore. But when you look at it, the picture as a whole, it will be reallocated where the greatest needs are.
Well, and I guess that's the concern is we're doing 25 at a time. So
Because we don't know what the needs are yet.
exactly.
And that's the pace that the administration felt they could do.
Exactly.
And so once we do have all 300, then we can look at the big picture
Yeah.
and see where are we, where are we subsidizing, where we probably shouldn't,
Right.
and where can we take from one and reallocate somewhere else where it is more of a public need or a public benefit. I think that's more of a big picture question.
Yeah. Well, and that's fair.
And I think
Well, I'm just
if we
curious
don't
on the
mind.
analysis, is there an alternative? One of the things that the committee struggled with is how you can go ahead and pay attention to the fact that some fees are highly subsidized, some fees aren't. And to do it, there's the three options that we had. The one that we can see there's a concern with here is 1/3 of the options that we offered. The others to say, in this instance, we're just going to stop providing this service because we can't afford to do it. And the other is that we'll continue to take money out of the general fund to subsidize it. So I didn't know if in your analysis you had any suggestions as a way to because any time that you try and adjust fees, the policy issue that you're raising is going to show up. It's going to be there any time that you decide, well, we're going to stop subsidizing this. In theory, that can free balance for someone to say, okay, there's more funds left in the general fund because you raised fees. But our intent wasn't to create a free-for-all to think what other things the city can do with this free balance. What we're seeing is how we could limit the amount of subsidization and make sure that we were financially stable over the long term. And so I just didn't know if you had any other suggestions to do that.
I guess the concern is when we say an alternative funding source to fill the gap. Maybe the council decides that the current funding source, which is the general fund that's already filling the gap, is okay, right? And so I think it almost seems like, with the administration will identify an alternative funding source. Maybe it should say, could possibly identify an alternative funding source.
But the general fund isn't filling that gap currently, right?
I think we're arguing about a semantic issue, right? Because it depends on an alternative to what. You're postulating that it might mean, and maybe it's because the language is ambiguous. You're postulating that alternative might mean an alternative to the current source, which is the general fund.
Right.
Another way of reading it, though, is that the alternative is an alternative to the user fee.
Well,
Meaning the general fund is the alternative to the user fee.
Yes.
Right, so it's just a question of whether this, I think you
That's
can raise
a
the
good-
question
very
of
good
whether the
point.
language is
Very good
ambiguous.
point. And And maybe that's just the challenge, is that it's just an issue of clarity.
That might be there, if that's what it
As it
is.
reads now, the three following sub-bullet points don't connect with that mandate. Must find an alternative funding source. Justifying how the community benefits over a reasonable time outweighs the cost of subsidization doesn't identify an alternative funding source. Adjusting user fees to eliminate the shortfall or reduce the shortfall to a justifiable level might be considered. But eliminating the service, that doesn't speak to an alternative funding source.
Right.
So I think the issue is, what is to be mandated, if anything? Is it a mandate, or is it a strong recommendation would be wise to, or should carefully consider, or, because once it's mandated, I think we're opening a can we don't want to.
And I think that was the big concern, is that we felt it was a mandate that, and maybe we're reading it wrong, like Brian said, but as we read it and talked about it, it seems like we're saying if there's a shortfall that's not going to be covered by the user fee, then
the council has to find some other way to pay for it than what we're paying, than how we're paying for it now. That's how we read it, and maybe that's not what was intended.
Well, the first possibility doesn't provide any kind of substitute. It says it's okay.
Yeah.
Subsidize it.
Well, and that first alternative was requested by the administration, and also it's a compromise provision put in there because the original language was stronger than that, to basically say you're not going to approve any fees that you're losing money on unless you know how you're going to pay for the money you're losing, because that gets you in the situation.
That's what the committee said.
That's what we originally, that's what we originally started with, and this is a compromise provision to try and get enough people happy with it, because some, both members of the committee and then other members of the city council were concerned, like you said, that it's going to tie your hands too much if we say that you will do it. But I think the original intent was to just make sure that the council is aware that there is a cost. Right now, the way that you do it is you just look for sources of revenue rather than trying to look at what you can trim or what fees you can generate to balance the budget. Right now, it's pretty straightforward, right? You have taxes, you have utility rates, and those are the two ways that you can pay for this without doing it. And I think the intent was to make sure if you know you're going to pay for this with a tax increase, that's fine. If you don't know where you're going to pay for it, and if you want to do it by raising utility rates, that's fine. But it's a different discussion when you're approving a fee when someone knows that you got to cover the subsidy than it is when you make a discussion thinking that it's just all there. The money's there in the general fund, we'll be fine. We don't need to raise this. Costs have gone through the ceiling. We don't need to raise it because there's money in the general fund. And so, I don't know, Larry, if you want to respond.
Well, I think I would agree. I mean, we heard exactly this point being made by the Parks and Recreation Department when they were asked about where's the money going to come from to maintain future parks that are in their budget. They said, oh, it'll come out of the general fund.
Yeah.
Well, yes, but where? And that's all what the committee's asking for, is that it seems to us prudent on the part of the city council to say, we agree to subsidize this activity at this level, and we know where we're going to get the money to do it.
And it's not the general fund.
It may be the general fund, but it's not just the general fund. You got to think about where it's going to come from and what the costs are.
The other trick that we have is balancing. Again, if you isolate it based on one fee, it's easy to ignore, externalize any of the costs that you don't want to talk about. In our original proposal to do all the fees in 1 year, we thought it'd be easier for everyone to see that and make the balance once. It's just going to take some time until all the data's there to where you can start having those interests compete against each other rather than just having a default that somehow money will come to take care of this. So.
The other concept that's relevant here that we at one point added some versions of the document and took it out because we didn't want to get too technical with the jargon is the notion that there is an opportunity cost, that if you do subsidize one activity, that means you can't do something else. And all we're suggesting is that the council should think about what aren't we going to be able to do because we're subsidizing this particular activity.
So I'll continue.
Yeah, let's move to your
questions there. Number 3, as we go through this, we've seen, the administration take on the first 25. It really is an unfunded mandate, and the 25 fees per quarter, 100 user fees per year. It requires, the finance staff, an additional burden on the finance staff, an additional burden on department heads and departments. The policy question we have: how will the council fund this? Does that mean an extra employee, or is the administration? Can the administration just absorb the added workload? And I think that's a discussion that probably should be had with the administration to see if they're comfortable, absorbing it.
And I think ultimately we finally rely on the administration's lead on that. It's just that from our sideline view, we know that it will take a real cost of hours and time. And can it be absorbed? I'm sure they'll find a way to make it absorbed, but you should also be aware that will represent a trade-off in some other area of service. And I don't know what that is. I mean, it will depend by person or by department, but without the council putting money behind this mandate or resources behind this mandate, there's just a trade-off to doing this work.
Are you suggesting it be part of the council's budget?
Not necessarily.
I remember the mayor and Wayne and you, Matt, raising this issue with us early on. And part of the reason for deciding on 25 was as an accommodation to that.
Just mentioned
that
that
was otherwise unfunded, and I have made the simplifying assumption that if they felt additional funding was necessary, it's in the budget.
I think as we've been through this first round of 25, one of the things we've learned is that there's some work done by the finance staff for sure, but it's really the line department that has to help define the direct cost. I mean, we know something from looking at the budget and going through invoices, but the department knows that best. And so, again, one of the nice things about doing 25 a quarter is we can spread those out. So the impact doesn't hit any one department all at once and create, as Matt suggested, this significant trade-off. By having 25 a quarter, we can kind of spread those out through departments. We can take like fees that result from the same service, like all the fees relative to the ice sheet, for example. So they only have to do the direct cost analysis really once every 3 years, and all of their fees are looked at that way. And so again, with that flexibility built in, we think we can spread that workload out over the year without creating an overwhelming burden for any one department at a time.
I think I recognize this was addressed earlier. I think one reason we brought up again was the administration has now had an opportunity to actually go through that process once, and if there was reasons for pause, this would be a good time to address that.
Yeah, I think the only thing, again, and I certainly recognize that it would be a very nice thing to be able to do all 300 at once. There are a lot of advantages to doing that. That is particularly burdensome, and again, I think if that were the desire of the council, our suggestion probably would be that you go out and hire a consultant to work with us and do a lot of the legwork associated with that. Now again, still the line departments are going to have to provide input even in the best of those scenarios, but if you wanted to do it without significantly added cost or significant burden, this 25 a quarter, at least so far, seems to be a pretty manageable number for us.
I just can't believe a business wouldn't want to know their cost. And the administration is running the business in the city of Provo.
Yep.
And to ask them to evaluate the cost of running that business is reasonable, and 25, I think as Wayne has said, 25 a year,
A quarter
is reasonable.
It's very manageable.
I just can't imagine you wouldn't want that knowledge.
Well, I think again, as former Mayor Stewart's indicated, one of the challenges, not all business units in the city are equal, nor do they have equal risk of being way out of balance. And so again, I think you put your emphasis where it needs to be, which is where you think there are problems, and you start there, and then you work your way back from that. And so again, I don't think every business every year evaluates all of its fees for service and all of its costs. We go through a budget process, and we, as a matter of balancing the budget, we're forced to ask those questions. We don't ask them all at the same level of intensity every year with the same department every year.
Are you in fact giving some priority when you put along?
Priority
in terms of the 25 accounts?
Well, again, the first 25 we discussed and had approved by the council really were areas, one, where we already had some questions that existed in our mind about cost versus revenue, or areas where we thought the analysis made sense doing it sort of at the same time. And so as we come back to you with the next 25 to begin the process with, there will be some prioritization. We'll have thought through that issue a little more thoroughly.
Another alternative that we mentioned briefly is, and this was something that the administration actually brought up when they reviewed it a few months ago, but there's some services that may be targeted to a certain demographic, and we worry that there's nothing in the user fees that accounts for that. So we talk about we should consider the effect of user fee price changes on demand. We talk about recovering costs, but it doesn't seem like there's much consideration for considering the demographic of the customer that the fee is intended for. So that is something that we thought would be something you can consider. Full cost recovery could price some customers out of the market, and maybe that's okay. Maybe that's in line with what the council wants, but we think that maybe there should be some kind of statement that takes that into consideration.
Demographic, anything other than income? Is that what you're saying?
No, we're talking about income.
Okay.
That's what we have in mind when we're talking about the demographics. Yeah, income is what we're.
Well, in my mind, it's slightly a little more broad. I mean, not very much, but I mean, the intended user may be youth sports versus adult sports. That's a demographic, so age, education, income.
So age,
So that's why we didn't just say income. Yeah. There may be other factors, depending on the fee and the service.
You know, some cities, I know we've experimented with this over the years when we've increased user fees and felt like in youth sports, for example, that we were pricing some out of the market. One of the things we did, and Scott, you remember this probably, we did kind of a scholarship program where we set aside a certain amount of dollars. We raised the fee, but we said if a low-income family wants to participate and they meet certain income guidelines, we will subsidize the fee for them, essentially. And so again, it doesn't show up in the consolidated fee schedule, but it is a program that we, and I don't know if we're still doing it, but we are. But there was a time when it had a little more emphasis. But again, if a low-income family comes in and says, "Gosh, it's $25 for our kid to participate in baseball," or whatever the number is, and that's we got 3 kids who want to participate, that's a little tough for us. Then we could sit down and talk about their income and say, well, we can pay all the fee or part of the fee or something to make sure that your child has an opportunity to participate. So again, it's not necessarily a discounted fee based on income, but it's an opportunity to infuse, again, subsidy, but very targeted subsidy at a specific demographic, as Ryan's suggesting. So I guess the point I'm making is there may be programs other than the appearance in the consolidated fee schedule that could address that concern.
And I kind of felt as a member of the committee that we had addressed that demographic in the words greatest community benefit. I thought demographics are also involved in the community benefit. Now, whether they're not, if we need to be more specific to that.
There's a specific bullet point that says justify how community benefit over a reasonable period of time outweighs the cost of subsidization. Right. And I believe that was what we had put in there for those reasons when we feel like the community benefit for these specific things as well.
And we
outweighs
considered
the
that
cost
when we
of the
talked
subsidization.
about it. It's just there may be.
If we need to be a little bit more specific on that.
Well, yeah, there may be something that doesn't have a great community benefit, but it's still something that you don't want to price people out of the market, right? So, and maybe like what Wayne's saying, the scholarship program, but I don't know. We just thought that maybe didn't capture that there could possibly be services that don't have the greatest community benefit, but that we don't want to price people out.
Well, if there's an at-risk demographic, youth or an elderly population, or I think that does, or low income, or it seems like that could fall under that.
And again, maybe this is just a matter of clarity in the language. We read it one way, and others read it another way.
Although I think we can be too careful about the language on this matter. Larry talked at our last meeting about part of the approach taken by the committee to user fees that they weren't able to get to. We talked about hoping still to add something to it, namely, how do we address the issue of equity when it comes to user fees across the board? How can we assure that what's being asked of citizens up and down the scale of wealth is equitable? And I'd hope that somehow that would find its way here, but I understand it may not be ready. something like that, but that has to be part of this. And I think the one point that comes to it, that approaches it most closely, the last point under principles, is not adequate.
So if it said justify how the community benefit or demographic equity over a reasonable period of time outweighs the cost of subsidization, or how would you phrase that? What would you say
I don't know how I would
to include that part?
I don't know. Anything more to add?
Yeah, I would observe that, in my mind, this is a living document, and that this represents, for all of the hours and hours that have been spent crafting it, it represents an initial commitment on the part of the council, which can and should be revisited periodically to make sure that it's still consistent with what the council is trying to accomplish and to reflect new information that comes along.
And then the last point, I didn't have an alternative for it, but the last point that we haven't mentioned is just a suggestion on the strategy section. It says the administration will analyze. We thought, instead of saying it like that, we thought language to the effect of, it is requested that the administration consider the following in their analysis, especially because, you know, as we talk about our you know, how the council sets the policy and then we let the administration execute that policy. To be consistent, we thought, you know, maybe these are some suggestions, but not telling the administration exactly.
In fact, just add 2 points to that, Ryan. One is an issue, a separation of powers, and actually state statute that says clarifying the roles between legislation and execution of and responsibilities. There are specifically statutes that says a council member, not short of a council, but council members shall not instruct the administration to do X, Y, and Z. Now, certainly this is not that situation, but I think that illustrates the principle that separation of powers. The council, if they're going to instruct exactly how the administration is going to, and Brian can weigh in on this maybe if I'm off base, but how the council would actually instruct the administration to do something would be by ordinance rather than policy. And then each fee may have a little bit different take, and again, setting the guiding principles and outcomes that the council wants, but not dictating an exact process how the administration will come to a conclusion, allows them more flexibility to find the best way to analyze a specific fee. And one fee may have a different process than another fee. And you know, until we get and talk to people on the ground and in the booths, it might be limiting if you say, no, this is the only way you're going to approach the analysis of fees. So I think it's just suggesting this as one alternative, and by saying the council would request the administration would consider these approaches and their evaluation of the fees, I think it's probably more in line with our form of government.
I think it's because they had already agreed to do it, and I don't think it was a separation issue
Sure.
when we were drafting this.
But with that analysis, if you're not specific on what you want reported, it's going to be very hard to do your deliberation. And if you feel that asking for a report on specific things is somehow intervening in executive response, I think that's a very unique constitutional analysis. I've never heard of an executive asking for a report. Now, the administration can say, oh, we can't give you that, or we don't want to give you that. And then you could compel it through an ordinance and say, you will give us this. But I don't think that I never sense any hostility to report this type of material.
No, this is for the future. So when you're all gone, and we have this policy still on the books, you know, again, the administration today may be amenable, agreeable to it, but who knows what the future administration is.
Dave, I agree with you. I think Matt does too. I think the point here is the way it's currently phrased, it's not phrased as a request. It says the administration will. Now, I agree, but I agree that with what you said, that it's because they've already expressed it. So I would suggest maybe something like, the administration has indicated in response to the council's request that it will do the following, and then say it is anticipated this analysis will include, and lay out the exact same bullet points that you've got.
Yeah, and most of those bullet points are for the council. I mean, it's just the first one I think that's for administration.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I think, you know, they've expressed their intent to do that, and I think the council can express that the council's strategy is to rely upon what the administration has said that it will do.
Right. And we can amend it if administration feels it's too onerous.
Could you say also the administration, upon analyzing the costs associated, take the word will out?
Sure.
So I think we put it in there specifically so we weren't doing the analysis. You know, I think the other way is to give all the data to the committee, but I think there is some heartburn with us not knowing all the factors, and if we just look at numbers, it would make more sense to have the actual department and those people that actually do this for a living do the analysis. And so
I think it's an easy fix. I think it's just a wordsmithing thing to address the concern that's been raised about that.
Mr. Parker, do you have a preference on the wording?
You know, I understand the concern about you know, creating something that a future administration may not feel comfortable with. I think Brian's come up with some pretty good language that, you know, the current administration has agreed to, which gives a future administration the opportunity to say, well, we didn't agree.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm comfortable with that kind of language. I think that'll be fine. I don't have any problem with that.
Well, thank you, Ryan. Thanks for your presentation and identifying these points and recommendations of staff. How do council members feel, or committee members, about updates to the draft? Do we include all of these recommendations? Are we ready to move this to a future council meeting for a vote?
Has there been discussion about what form this takes, where it ends up? Is it a separate resolution? Does it fall under our financial principles document that we jointly adopt every year with the budget? Is there I just don't know what form it takes and what form might be most useful. You know, we do this you know, discussion of financial principles in the budget document, which then becomes adopted by reference each year with the budget. We could, you know, we've got a section on revenues. We could create a separate section on user fees, or insert it into the revenue piece of that document, or you could create an entirely separate standalone document. I don't know that we care, but I just thought it might be worth asking the question.
I think it's a great question. I don't know if we've articulated our viewpoint on my viewpoint on it. Is I was operating the assumption this would be adopted as a council policy to reside in the council policy
handbook.
But it could reside in multiple locations, or either or. It's either way, it'd be the expression of the council.
There's nothing to prevent the administration from adopting some or all of it as part of those.
That's correct.
Annual.
Sure. Yeah, we could certainly do that either. Yeah, that's fine too.
I think it'd be good to have it included in the user fee section of the actual budget as the guiding principles for the council. And to have it as well as in our own handbook for reference there. So that would require a resolution in our regular meeting.
Well, to include it in the budget would, to just make it part of your handbook, you could just do by motion in a work session. Doesn't have to go to
So we could do that first, and then to include it, we could do it at another meeting.
And considering, you know, that you're voting on the budget tonight, it could be, you could include it in next year's budget, or if there's I suppose it could also be added in August if there's truth and taxation hearing, but.
Or a special resolution.
Right.
That doesn't
Yeah,
pass.
either way. Yeah, I don't think from the printed budget document, we're not going to do that until after, assuming you move to an August truth and taxation hearing, we're not going to do the final book until we get there. And so I think you would have the option, if you wanted to include it in a resolution adopting your final budget and setting the certified tax rate, that you could adopt that by reference, you know, as an appendix A to that resolution, and we just insert it into the document before we printed it. You've got options, certainly.
So I'm wondering if we could go through And are there any concerns with some of these bullet points? I don't see a lot of concern with the changing of some of this wording, but I would like to hear from council members or from budget committee if there is concern with changing bullet point 1 to capital upgrade replacement fund. That seems like a simple change to me. Bullet point, I'd like to go through each bullet point and just see if there are concerns and if there's anything that's really going to require moving this to another meeting, or if we can get our arms around it right here and vote on it.
If we can do it quickly.
Okay. All right, so bullet point 1, are there any concerns among council members with replacing the words capital maintenance fund to capital upgrade replacement fund?
No.
No? And then committee members, any problems with that word changing? Okay. Bullet point, and we just get their reference, obviously we'd be voting, but just to get their input I think is helpful. Bullet point 2, adding in addition to considering the impact to customers and revenues to that statement, bullet point number 7. Any problems with adding that? Okay, speak up if there are. And then bullet point 8, we talked about what that looks like as far as filling the gap.
That's when I'm having a hard time getting my mind around.
Can I make a comment about that? I think the point that raised by Mr. Miller is that, in my mind at least, from a logical flow perspective, it states that you have to identify the shortfall funding before it then says that you may decide to eliminate the shortfall funding. So if it were me, if I were drafting it myself, I would go back to the bottom of the first page and have it say, where it says, will identify, I would say, we'll evaluate whether to, and then put the 3 bullet points about the 3 choices. Okay? Justify whether to keep the shortfall, adjust the fees to eliminate or reduce it, or eliminate the service. And then after making that decision, say, if the shortfall continues to exist, the council will identify with the assistance of the administration the funding source for that shortfall. And I think if you just say, in my mind from the conversation we had earlier, if you just say the funding source instead of the alternative funding source, then it eliminates the ambiguity about what's an alternative to, and the funding source identified can be the general fund if that's what the council chooses to identify. Now maybe I've missed the boat on what the intent was, but that seems to me to solve kind of both those problems as far as putting those in a different order and solving this ambiguity about the alternative problem. So I throw that out there for what you.
Okay, is that, yeah,
sounds
good.
good.
Me too. Okay, so then the next bullet point, the word purpose.
Before you move on,
okay.
Hal, where are you at? How are you feeling about that wording there? I'm a lame duck. You are not. No, please don't desert us now. We need you. Thoughts? I really need your opinion and perspective on that today.
Well, unfortunately, I'm cursed with professorial manner. I don't like to make these kinds of maneuvers
Spontaneous. I understand. Respect that.
So the next one would be replacing the word purpose with community benefit, or the word purpose was replaced with community benefit, and they feel like outcome would be a better word to use instead of.
Or we were adding outcome.
Or we're
to
at
it.
the word outcome.
Yeah.
Can I comment on that one?
Yeah.
So the original draft where this was included had the word purpose. Personally, I still like that the best. And then the second draft had the community benefit, and then this suggestion from staff is to substitute the word outcome. I'm really fine with all those, although I like purpose the best. That's my comment.
And Mr. Walters, did you have a comment?
I am a little concerned about replacing community benefit with the term outcome, because it seems to me that the term outcome is more general, less specific. And I think that the language is more clear if we leave it at community benefit.
And outcome? Or do you want to just don't like the word outcome?
It's not better. It's not better than what's there. We spent a lot of time working on these words, and I think community benefit is better than outcome.
Other thoughts? I'm good with community benefit. I don't know where everyone else is at with.
I'm okay with leaving it that way too.
Mr. Winterton, are you? You're fine with that? Yeah, Kelly?
Yeah.
Fine with it?
I'm fine with it. I don't see any, I don't know that we're hurting ourselves by adding the word outcome also, but I'm not that tied to it either, so.
Mr. Miller? Do you have a?
Indifferent.
Indifferent? Okay. So just leave it with community benefit for that one. And then the strategy section. So the will, we've already talked about that wording. If we could adopt the wording that Mr. Jones, instead of saying that the administration will analyze the costs, if we can.
And my proposal had been that it would say, could say, the administration has indicated in response to the council's request that it will analyze the costs associated, and then insert also before the bullet points so that they make sense, or so they flow better from that sentence, something like, it is anticipated this analysis will include, and then that was more consistent.
Okay. Everybody good with that? Any concerns? Okay. And then the last, so we decided unfunded mandate was not a problem. They mentioned that 25 per quarter was manageable, Mr. Parker. And the final one is demographic of the customers, and maybe including some wording there.
Do you want to hear another proposal?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Since I'm
our wordsmith
taking over. I just wondered if I understood the concern right. I just wondered if you go back to the third bullet point on the first page, if you could address that by adding this. So individual benefit from actual use and community benefit, comma, which may include benefits aimed at specific demographic groups in the community, comma, generated by the existence of the service. So the intent there, in my mind, is just to clarify the community benefit. Because I think, as I understood it, I think the concern was that it seemed to be contrasting that the only two categories were the benefit to one person or a benefit to the entire community. And so if that's the concern, this would balance that by saying community benefit, the term community benefit includes targeted benefits for certain demographics, if that's what the council's trying to do.
That was not our intent,
Okay.
but if that's the council's intent, that's fine.
And I'm not trying to push that, I'm just saying that was one way of expressing what I understood the concern to be, if that's the council's concern.
I think my thought on that one, I'm kind of leaning toward more what Mr. Miller said, where that might require a little thought as to what we would want to say on that one. So my preference would be to just leave that out for now and until we have a more specific proposal.
individual benefit. There's no way to add recognizing the
mean, I think
And originally we had questions at the end too. The administration put, questions at the end of their, and we could have it as a, I don't know, question added to the very end, that something to look for, I don't know.
Or we could just add it later after we've given it some thought and have some language to consider.
We could do that too. I feel like it's part of that community benefit, but I've been involved in the discussions for so long that that's been part of the discussion. As far as when we talk about community benefit, we're talking about all demographics, we're talking about all, that includes everybody, right? So I don't feel like they're excluded from community benefit, or that we're trying to exclude a demographic by any means. So I think that's a good suggestion too. If we decide that there's some, we can always adjust it later.
So adjust it later, meaning take it out?
No, well, we don't have it added in apparently.
Yeah.
I felt like it was in there sort of,
Yeah.
but it's not as clearly as some would like. And I don't know if other council members feel it that same way, that they want it added in somehow. But I don't think we should hold up the entire document if it looks like we're pretty comfortable with it, and I wouldn't want to hold it up for that one part that we could by resolution, or I don't know if we even have to do I guess we do need a resolution in this meeting, Matt, to put this into the handbook by motion. So by motion, I don't know.
I'm not sure about holding it out. I don't understand what we're dealing with here. I'm sorry.
Well, and I don't know that what I'm saying is it would be nice to adopt it by motion today, and if there was concern that wasn't specified well enough and people have had time to think about it and they come back later and say, oh, I think we should specify that a little bit better, then we could come at a later time and add that in. But since right now no one has the words that they would like to be put in there, I think we should adopt it by motion, and then if there's some concern after thought, to then come back and add it later.
An alternative may be to ask Brian and Matt to provide yet a further revision that considers all that was said here today. Show that to the committee and to the administration. Then revise once again with those comments in place and send it out to us for reading with the notion of a motion at our next work session.
And just as a member of the committee, the other alternative I thought of is proving everything except the disputed language, and then doing that with the language that there is an agreement. One of the concerns that I've seen since we first started this presentation process before February is that every look at the document, there's something that someone wants to discuss further. So we revised this almost every line, almost every word, multiple times. And at some point, you just have to decide, is this close enough to what you want to get you there? Or are you going to wait until there is not any objection at all to any conceived principle in it? And I think Councilmember Santiago is trying to get it moved so we can go on to the other things. But I thought you could, in your resolution, say that we proved to put it into your policy book with the expectation that the two or three policies that there are questions on will be reviewed by council staff and by legal and sit down with the committee, and then we can just hammer those out. So the scope of what we discussed doesn't keep getting enlarged and contracted and enlarged and contracted, because I think that's one of the things that's difficult. When our original charge, it was to give you guiding principles that would make it easier for you to make decisions when it came time to approve the fees. It was in the backdrop of a painful business licensing experience that multiple members of the council experienced, and there wasn't any document they could point to say, look, these are our principles, this is why we're making the decision in this direction. Most of the document already serves that purpose, I think. It's just fine-tuning it in those one or two paragraphs, and then we bring those last couple paragraphs back, and then you'd approve that and just update, because it's not going into an ordinance. It's basically for your assistance, but you have the value of having it there as you finish the budget discussions for this year, and then we can continue to fix it going forward. As Larry said, it can be an evolving document, and you can direct the committee, who's ever on the committee, to say, okay, we want you to, this bullet point, we're uncomfortable with this, we want you to change it. So that would just be another alternative rather than postpone it. And I don't know that there's any value based on the fact that you're going to vote on the budget tonight. I just don't know that it's that valuable. But I think that was our original consensus as a committee, was trying to get it approved and then work out whatever was wrong with it later.
Other thoughts on?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I just want to raise one final point. It's not a new point, but it's related to one of the other points. In the strategy section, there were council staff raised concerns about the use of the word will, and we addressed those with respect to the first bullet point.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't address it with respect to the last bullet point, which in my mind is actually a little bit more concerning because of the specific state statute that says department heads are not subject to instruction by the council. And again, I don't think that's what was intended. But it does say department heads will regularly be asked, and it doesn't say who's going to regularly be asking. So, to the degree that is a valid concern, I would suggest something like it's requested that department heads regularly be asked, or something to that effect, just to make it clear that that's not a mandate from the council directed at the department heads.
I'm good with that language.
Yeah, I think that could easily change to the administration. I think that may have actually come at the recommendation of the administration saying we will have this is how we'll do it. And
right.
Again, the council doesn't have an interest out as long as it's done.
And that's what I anticipated, is that this was the administration said, here's our strategy for complying, and we just got into the document tonight.
But I think that'd be a good chance.
At this point, I start to wonder, what difference does it make for 2 weeks now? I mean, it's not ever. I think that we're all so close. This is the body that needs to actually make the decision. We've appreciated the recommendations and the amounts, the huge work effort that's been made by the council. And then what we did that as a budget committee. I mean, we did it as a committee. Then we had other input come in. So I understand the frustration of not having it completed at this point. This is the best discussion that we have as a council have had on this discussion. I think as we write it up one more time, I don't see that we're hurting ourselves. I think we're in basic agreement. There might be just a few words that we could wait for 2 weeks to make the final decision on. With that being said, Kim, I hope you're not going to shoot me on this, but I'd like to have I would make a motion that we have the staff incorporate and possibly redline, like Mr. Miller has suggested, a few changes into a document that we all seem to be fairly close on at this point, and allow ourselves the 2 weeks to look at that and then make the decision in our work session next week. I know that there have been times on the council where we've sat on the dais and received, oh, I just barely got this document. And now I don't feel comfortable voting on it as we sit at the dais. We have not even got the document actually in front of us yet. Maybe we're not quite, some members of the council are not quite there yet. We have worked and worked and worked on this. I think we're so close that I just don't see a lot of benefit in not having the document in front of us in 2 weeks.
It feels to me, too, like a document that's at a fairly final stage, and we're just almost there. But it would be helpful to see with the significant helpful edits that have been and suggestions that have been made here today. Is that a motion then,
that was
Mr. Winterton?
In the form of a motion.
Is there a second? Mr. Miller?
Is there discussion?
Discussion?
Yeah, I think, the process has been a very long one, and there is a point to the fact that the document, we could bring up the document next week or in 2 weeks and have this same discussion with more added changes at that point, and to continue in another 2 weeks. I mean, every time we've come, we either haven't been able to get comfortable enough with the document to as far as actually read the document and have a discussion on it. That happened a couple of times, and so I think that there is a point to be made that each time we come, there could be further revisions and further revisions every time we come, and I think we're really close. And we just went through all of the the staff recommendations, we've gone through the administration's recommendations, we've gone through citizen recommendations, we've gone through a lot of recommendations, and I personally would, I think that it would actually be better to adopt it and to move on. And if there are, there's one thing that we're hung up on, and that's literally, it could be 2 words, it could be 3 words, and I just think, given the amount of time, and it's not just our time, but it's the budget committee's time, and having them come, in the middle of the day, I don't know, spending their time as well. I don't see anything that we're in disagreement on, except for that last point where we may want to add some words, but we don't have any words to add right now, and we may not in 2 weeks. We may not in 2 weeks. Maybe when people get comfortable with it, and actually, maybe have a chance to look at it at that one part and say, would I add words? Would I not add words? I don't think we wait 2 weeks to decide if we would add words to it. I think that we're there. We've gone through the document, multiple times.
I guess
and
what's the harm of waiting 2 weeks?
Well, because the administration's ready. They're ready with the fees. We could get started and we could get going on those, and we're going to get them every quarter. So. Well,
we can do that anyway because we're in agreement on that.
Well, but we can't do that without having our guiding principles in place. We can't look at the fees without having the principles that are going to guide us through that fee discussion. This is the first step. So let's get these in place, and let's, if there is a change to be made, then let's make that in 2 weeks. But and allow the administration to bring the fees to us. If they're ready to go. And I think that discussion is going to take some time too. And I think we're going to need a few. The way this is done, we probably need that full 3 months to discuss those 25 fees. And so I think my thought is we're there, we're comfortable with it. There's a couple of words here that we might want to add, but we don't even know what they are yet. So why would we hold it up for some ambiguous couple of words or sentence that we may add later? It's my thought.
Because those couple of words could affect very substantially what we agree to.
And we can add those in 2 weeks.
Why not have an entire document that everyone can consider the final document?
Mm-hmm. And
in order to make the motion and vote on it, it won't impede the administration. It won't impede our analysis of what the administration provides. But it will have resolved some substantial issues that are not resolved here and that haven't been resolved in the suggested changing words.
And does everyone feel that kind of consensus? I mean,
personally, Kim, I feel confident that it won't go beyond another 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
That based on the progress we've made here today, that we can bring this to a full resolution in 2 weeks.
And I agree with that. I do agree with that personally.
Other discussion? So we have a motion and a second. Unless there's a substitute motion, I'll call for a vote.
Well, I have a substitute motion,
Okay.
but I don't know. It seems kind of, I really actually want everyone to feel comfortable with it. So maybe I don't have a substitute motion, because it's more important to me that everybody's on the same page moving forward. And so if we need a couple of weeks, that's fine. I would just strongly urge everybody to read the document in full before they come. Really come prepared to discuss, and we have had a good discussion today, and I really do appreciate that. But I want everyone to be comfortable, and I feel like that's going to really help us when the fees do come, and those are more difficult discussions, that we're all on the same page. That's really important to me. So I'm fine moving it 2 weeks forward, as well as long as that's the goal is to move on and be able to just have this in place, because I really feel like we're in agreement on 99% of it, and it's just this one little bit that we're waiting on. So
a little bit of uneasiness at this point.
Okay, and I don't want uneasy. I don't want any. Personally, I think that if we all need to be very comfortable with this moving forward. So
I think we beat each other up in the committee so much that we're more comfortable with it as committee members. Yeah. But as we bring it back to the council, there is an uneasiness, I feel, so.
Yeah.
All right, then I'll call for a vote. Those in favor of the motion made by Mr. Winterson? And that vote is unanimous. Very good.
And that includes all of the changes that we've, right? Everything that we've.
Yes.
Just from the committee's perspective, if there was no change proposed, so we will leave that language as is, or are you asking for a full review of the entire document?
I think at this point, we were just discussing the changes that were recommended by staff, and I think most of those have been agreed upon. And I think ultimately, there's just basically one, I didn't think it was just basically that one issue.
Just wording.
Just the wording on
It'd be
that
helpful
one.
for the committee to know what you want us to
There's
solve,
direction.
so again, we can narrow the scope and just solve the problems that you see with it. So, and I just sat through the discussion, but I'm not sure I understand what you want us to fix.
And I think there is nothing to fix until we get the recommendation from the staff, which will be sent to you.
Okay.
I want you to say, this looks terrific.
We're also academics, so we'll never say that. This will be the best we can do. That's as much as I can get.
Say it hard. Pay attention to the revisions that have been made.
There you go.
We concur.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Santiago, for the presentation, and Mr. Harvey, and certainly Mr. Walters, Mr. Arman, and Mr. Stewart for your ongoing participation and help with us here today.
Mr. Chair, the item also indicated council budget intent statements.
We've already
I
passed.
didn't find that document in the materials for the meeting.
I think it's on the agenda to go. There's some on the public document site that are not on the agenda to go, but I thought I saw it on the agenda to go.
Which document, sorry?
The budget committee intent statements, I saw them
Those were
somewhere.
not attached this time.
I saw them somewhere. But they're not, they weren't, we already passed those in our meeting, I don't know, a couple of months ago. The intent statements were passed, but I thought I saw those, maybe it was an email instead. I apologize, I thought I saw those on public documents.
Okay, you okay?
Just trying to see. The screen's not working.
Well, we'll go back then to the order that we have before us on the agenda, with the exception of Mr. Uhl and Mr. Mashinsky, who were notified to come back in a little bit. That moves us to item 3, quarterly budget report for the second quarter of fiscal year 2015, presented by Dan Follett, Finance Director. Or are you representing Dan on this?
Yes, Dan had health issue related to his mother that kind of came affected, so he was.
So we asked you to do this, John?
Yes.
All right, great, perfect, thank you.
Well, we're excited as the finance to give you an update on the second quarter for this current year. I would just mention that my plan is just to give you a real brief summary and then give the council an opportunity to ask any questions if you have any questions on the report. But it is an unaudited summary report for the second quarter ending December 31st. We anticipate that we'll have the third quarter here shortly. But it's a summary that provides information for the general fund, also for the library, our enterprise funds, which include the golf course, the water fund, the wastewater, energy, storm drain, and sanitation. The intent and purpose of the report is really try to provide some comparative data and just give you a snapshot of how we're looking at from revenues and total expenditures. I would mention that in the general fund, we have been trending positively at the end of the second quarter. That trend has continued up till the present time. The three areas that we're seeing in the revenues that are up most significantly over our original budget are sales tax, sales and use tax, also our parks and recreation, which is primarily attributed to the rec center, and then community development fees. We've had some commercial projects as well as an uptick from the economy. Some residential that's shown some impacts on community development fee as well. So those areas have shown some positives. And so as a general fund, as you look here on page 3, you can see on our revenues, and this is just our total revenues and transfers that we've got. This is for the first quarter that we're seeing positive trends. This represents our actual, this right here represents the budget, so we are in excess of our budget. And so that's positive. If you go to the next slide, you can see sales tax revenue and a similar trend with sales tax. And once again, it's trending positively. We are above prior year as well as above the budget. And so with that, I don't think I'm going to walk you through the entire report. I think what we really wanted to do is just provide an opportunity for each of you to ask any questions if you want. You've had the report in your packets, and I didn't plan on just kind of walking through the whole thing, just kind of hit the highlights and see if you have any questions. So do any of you have questions for me about the report or about where things are looking through the second quarter of this fiscal year?
I had a couple of questions.
Yes.
So the sanitation fund summary,
Yes.
there was an item that said transfer to other funds, and it seemed like that was the biggest transfer. I was just wondering what the other funds were on that.
Let me get to the report here.
Page 15.
So in the actual fund summary,
Yeah.
so there's a transfer to the general fund, a transfer to the sanitation, and the transfer to the other funds.
It was 600 something. I can't get mine.
And it's roughly at 300. Denise, is that the transfer for their?
Is it duplicating that? I can't. Do you have that?
No.
Right? Can you go back there?
Trying to look.
Okay, I was gonna say.
This is page 15.
16. Page 16.
I was wondering if it was the money that they're transferring that they're accumulating for a potential new
So
facility.
they transfer some to their capital CIP fund.
Oh, okay. Oh, you know what? I think I was looking at the budget.
That one's lined out as
There's a
the,
transfer to their sanitation CIP fund of $75,000.
if you add those two numbers, what's that? If you add the 114 and 37, don't they add up to the 150?
Which?
Do you know what I mean?
So this is
It's,
just the
I think it's a
So
duplicate, yeah.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? Because if
That's
you
right.
add those two
That's
numbers.
the total of these two lines.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good question.
And what are the other funds? Did you say? Sorry, I was.
That's just what that is. That's a total of the general fund and so it's just.
Oh, that's a total of both those. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we just
Sorry.
need to change
Yeah.
it.
Good
Yeah.
question. Good
Okay. And then I had another question about the telecom under energy.
Yes.
Under the energy, I think it was the same type of report. Where is it?
Yeah, I know what the transfer to the
Yeah, just a little
telecom
bit, right?
debt services.
Yeah,
Is that your question
telecom.
is?
Where is that?
That is the
Okay.
515 that gets charged to each of the residents. And also an amount, what happens is it's billed as an energy rate charge, the telecom debt service charge. We collect it in energy and then we transfer it to the telecom debt service fund where the actual annual debt payments are made each year
Right.
for the bonds.
And then there's the tax on that goes to the telecom debt fund, right? The tax that's on it's a franchise tax or
There's
something.
a franchise fee.
Or franchise fee.
That
Isn't that
actually
a
goes
tax?
to a different fund. That goes to our telecom fund.
And where is that? Is that in this spreadsheet somewhere?
It's not.
Okay. And where
But I
is
think-
that documented at?
It's internal service funds, and so it's not reported in this report, but we could give you the information.
We can give you information.
Yeah.
When it was originally, we could include this as part of the quarterly report when it was just when the quarterly report was established. and agreed upon with the council, that was not one of the funds that was included in it. This is not all inclusive of the city, it's just kind of the major things.
Oh, okay,
But if we wanted to add that, we could.
okay. It'd be helpful to see.
And what's happening in that fund is that there's money that's accumulating.
To pay off the debt, right?
And then the plan is that at some time, if we want to pay the debt off, if we get to the point where we can pay the debt off early, we can use it for that. Or if we have fiber needs, we could work through the council and use it for that. But it is accumulating there and not being spent in the separate funds that was agreed upon with the council.
Okay. And that's just in a general inter-service fund?
Yes, because what we also do is and this is something that we've done for some time, is that we have an internal service fund charge each year that totals $300,000, and it's kind of for the fiber optic needs of the different departments, and that money gets collected in that same fund, and then we service our needs for their fiber needs, providing their internet service and whatnot. But that's another way that money is accumulating there as well, because the actual costs are less than that, and so that fund is building. And we have a very significant amount of money in there that's there that would may be used down the road to pay off those bonds early when we get closer to the end of the debt service.
When would be?
2024.
24.
So it's about 9 years.
In addition to that, in our Google agreement, we have a requirement that after the 15-year time period, we either renegotiate with Google or we get off the fiber for our internal needs. And so part of that fund is being built up as a capital replacement fund, so that if that appears to be reality, that we need to totally get off of our dark fiber agreement with Google, we'll have cash proceeds available to overbuild fiber for the city's internal network. So that was part of the decision that was made at the time the Google sale was transacted, is to build up a cash reserve so that if we needed to replace the fiber, if not, and if that agreement is able to continue long term, then it could be used to pay off the debt.
How long have we been doing that?
Since we did the Google transaction.
So since Google,
So
that's
3
when it
years.
started, so 2 years ago?
Yeah. Okay. I guess actually it started with the 535, didn't it?
It did. So
it actually started before the Google fiber sale.
Okay. So in years, that would be.
Well, it would have been
still a
we
little
put
over
the
2 years.
Yeah, we put the 535 in place a year before
I'd say a year before, yeah.
Google, so it's probably been 3 years accumulated.
Okay. Okay.
Other comments or questions for John?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, John. We appreciate the regular update and helpful information. We'll next turn to the Executive Director of Downtown Provo Inc., Brady Curtis, who has come to give us an update on the progress of the organization and your goals for the year ahead. Brady, welcome. Is this your first presentation to this
Yeah, I
group?
did. There's a jump drive. They got it yet.
Right here. This one.
So, thank you. It's good to be here today. I'm happy to meet you. I've been on the job about 2 months, and I've learned that the biggest part of the job, I think, is building relationships, and not only with myself and downtown businesses and city leaders and event organizers, but it's also encouraging them to build relationships with each other. So if I haven't kind of reached out to you personally, I know you a little bit just from looking on the website, just stalking your social media accounts. I'd like to expand that relationship. So feel free. I want to be really responsive to you and the council's needs. So feel free to email me. My contact information is brady@downtownprovo.org. And I have updates on the website and stuff. But let's get started. Let's see here. Okay, the purpose of this report. I don't want to be presumptuous in coming in and acting like I know what the purpose of this report is, because this is my first time. So I would like some feedback on this. But the city, Provo City, is DPI's largest donor. The goal of this report is to demonstrate to the council and to the city that this particular donation or membership fee was received and appreciated, that the donation or membership fee was used for the purpose it was intended, and that your contribution is having a positive impact with the downtown neighborhood. But first, I want to introduce you to the new team. If DPI deserves any credit, give it to Mike and Kenesha. I think maybe you guys have known them and have built relationships with them. They deserve, a lot of the credit. And also Jared, any kind of predecessor of mine, deserves all the credit for the good that DPI has done. And if there's any kind of fixes or changes or problems that need to be solved, I'm excited about tackling those and finding solutions. But here's kind of the new DPI team. I hope you can pick out me in that picture, but there's Christine is on this end and Aria is on the end. There's three of us. Christine is a full-time member of the DPI team, and Aria is an intern. The BYU, she's a BYU kind of rec management from the business program. I think they're a good kind of contributor to Provo City. There's always kind of a fresh batch of interns and people that want to get their hands wet and excited to get working. A little bit about myself. I have a degree from BYU in biology. I have a JD. I'm a lawyer, and I got my JD from University of Utah. Christine, she also went to BYU. She has her both her undergraduate and graduate degrees in art and art history. So she's a really, really smart individual. You could talk to her about anything, and she can talk, be really conversational on any subject. So she's really, really smart. And I talked about Aria. Okay, here's just a little bit more about me. I'm a computer programmer. I'm a code monkey. I got myself through college as a computer programmer. I'm a legal professional, an entrepreneur. I'm kind of presumptuous in kind of saying that because I haven't actually kind of started and ran a successful business, but I did win a major competition at the U while I was in law school. I'm an analytics expert. I like statistics. I like numbers. My degree kind of focused in computer science and bioinformatics. I like to have boots on the ground. I like to get my hands in the project. I like to be involved. And I really do enjoy wearing multiple hats, which I think in any small organization, you need to wear multiple hats. You might need to be a lawyer for the day. You might need to be a computer programmer for the next day. So that's me. Here's kind of what I've been working on for the past 2 months since I've been on the job. DowntownProvo.org. It's been great. It's been functional. It's been doing its job, but it's a little outdated. So we've been building a new website. It's going to be more responsive and more current. Christine's going to be running the blog. It's an e-commerce website. These are kind of the foundations or the packages. It's a WordPress website. The main posts are the most kind of publicity we get, or the most interest we get on social media and the website. It's like what's going on in Provo. So we're going to have a high focus on the newsletter and getting out word about events. We can sell tickets on this. We have kind of a dine around where we sell tickets. It's all going to be kind of integrated through the website. It's going to be connected to our social media. One of the biggest things I mentioned is kind of building relationships. There's a lot of partner content that we're developing for this website. There's a new video production studio going in on Center Street called Big Door Network. And you'll see when I give kind of the budget report, they're getting involved and giving us video assets. They have a show called Backstage Avenue. It's about the Provo music scene, and it's also kind of like entertainment and food and dining. It's hosted by one of the famous singers in Provo that I did just get my mind here. Anyway, Backstage Avenue, look for the website. Let's see, we bought a domain name, downtownprovo.com. It was fairly expensive, I think, for a domain name, but it's $1,500, not too bad. But the .com, I think, kind of gives legitimacy to kind of any organization. We do have the .org, ProvoRestaurant.com. So that's kind of what we're doing with the website. Here's kind of a lot of our benchmarks are tied to social media. The strategy we're taking, there's ways to get numbers just to get numbers. You can, you can basically pay for numbers, you can pay for followers. We've kind of shied away from that particular approach because we want organic followers, people who are interested and engaged in the content. So all the numbers and increase in growth weren't bought or aren't kind of manufactured numbers. These are all just kind of organic people who see their friend that's following and they follow. So here's some of the numbers. On Facebook, we're increasing about 120 a month. These are for the 2 months that I've been in. Instagram, we've had a lot of growth on that. It's gone up to about 700 followers. Our goal on Instagram was to get to 3,000 followers, so we're close on that one. And in Twitter, also, those are increasing at a rate about 200 a month. Okay, events. A big part of the job is kind of events and downtown events. I have a particular focus. When I interviewed for the job, I gave this line: activities and events are nice, but activities that create business are better. There's kind of two purposes, I think, for an event. One purpose is to just have an atmosphere that's inviting, that people are, when they think of downtown, they think of fun, and they think of it's a great place to be and a lot of things to do. But the other purpose for events is to kind of drive business and convert that into dollars. So I have a particular focus to use activities to create new assets. And those assets are email addresses and social media connections. If someone comes to an event like Place Street Provo, we're going to have that Saturday right here on Center Street. If people come to this event and there's no way to kind of invite them back, it would be better if you had a way to invite them back. So there is a particular focus in trying to get people to come to an event and also kind of convert that into, more money spent downtown and increase in traffic in downtown businesses. Okay, so DPI events, we report on this quarterly, and I want to be, really honest and upfront about what DPI does and what other event organizers do. DPI events support about 25 to 35,000 patrons a year. And I'm going to talk about some of these events. And when I say DPI events, those are events that I'm investing kind of man hours into, that we put a lot of time into, that maybe have a partner but kind of without our help, there's kind of no feasible way that particular event would happen this year. And it's not saying that it couldn't happen organically next year. Like, for instance, Place Street Provo, there's a UVU department that kind of puts money and time into it, and we have volunteers from that particular department. But we've invested a lot of time and effort as a team of three to kind of make that event happen. Other events that we actually put a lot of manpower into, the Children's Art Festival, and we build these relationships. That event was kind of planned by the art committee, but we've expanded it, and we're making it bigger, and we're inviting more people, and we're getting the word out. We're kind of putting our efforts behind it to make it a bigger and kind of more successful event. Taste of the Valley, this is a particular event. That event was done by the Chamber of Commerce. They decided they didn't want to do it this year. Someone, just private business owner, came and said, I wanted I want that event, I'd like to use that name. But I contacted that person and said, I want you to hold this event downtown. If you hold it downtown, I'll take care of your licensing. I'll introduce you to Coca-Cola. They'd love to be a partner in that event. So these types of events, we kind of put manpower. So I hope you kind of can maybe see the difference between events that kind of happen without our help, like the marathon or rooftop concert series, and events where we're actually kind of putting kind of blood, sweat, effort into. Non-DPI events, and I'm saying that maybe, rooftop concert series, those are great success. I don't know if any of you had a chance to actually go to that and see it, but there was a lot of people down there, and it's a great thing for downtown Provo. I kind of classify these as non-DPI events, but we're trying to make these particular events more friendly to downtown businesses. For instance, we have a rooftop concert series. When you shut down the road, they shut down the road, I think the night before, like Thursday night. And if it wasn't Thursday night, they shut them down early Friday morning at like 8 a.m. Downtown restaurants take a big hit with those road closures. Like Sensuous Sandwiches, kind of sitting there right next to New Skin, and that side of the road's all closed. They take a huge hit in business. So we try to manage those relationships between those events and these downtown businesses to try and make it a positive to those downtown businesses too.
Brady, with the hit that they take because of the road closure, are they not making it up because of the number of people that are brought down right next to their store?
You would think, and that is the goal, but this particular rooftop concert just had unique challenges, and one of those unique challenges to Sensuous Sandwiches, the food trucks were just kind of situated right outside her particular business. So another example, Bruges the Waffle kind of joint right there on Center Street, he took a huge hit during lunch, but he did have an increase in traffic at night with all that kind of foot traffic, but in the end, it just kind of ended up to be an average Friday for him. So we're talking to Rooftop. Our goal is to always kind of just build a relationship, have a great concert, and find a way to support downtown businesses. Just for example, how we kind of solve these problems. We had a restaurant association meeting where we get all the restaurants together. We're brainstorming what we could do to. Part of, I think, the food truck being a part of this event, you can always say kind of no food trucks. There is an ordinance on Center Street. That particular ordinance, it can be that there are exceptions to it, and they can be allowed. And we kind of allowed them for a particular reason. This rooftop concert, but with the restaurants, we're brainstorming ways to try and encourage business in the restaurant, and all the restaurants are agreeing to and want to just have a prize, a drawing. If you buy and spend money on that Friday, you're entered into a drawing or a raffle to get food at downtown restaurants for a year. And it's just a way to create excitement. Most of the restaurants think that they can, recoup their costs and their donations. About, $100 to $200 of food per restaurant we think to get involved. So we're just trying to make it fun and exciting and have them actually grow their business at the same time. So any questions on any event thing related?
Yeah, I'm shocked and a little concerned about how quickly we're going to be getting the temple.
Yeah.
And those are something, wow. We're going to, with 1 million people potentially in our downtown, I'm concerned about the three of you handling an event like that.
Well,
we need some help here if we're going to make this work.
We are so excited. And you know what? The good thing about DPI and the three of us is we have partners. Like when we have an event like Play Street Provo, we call up Coca-Cola and we say, we need 20 to 30 10 by 10 tents. and they're happy to bring their team and help and do that. So if it's kind of boots on the ground type thing, we have partnerships. If it's other things, I think we like graphic design or video production or marketing. You know, we do have kind of connections that we try to do. But I'm also in favor of increasing the budget or getting more people or hands on deck. But
I'm just gonna, it may help. The administration, the city administration is organizing a committee which is going to do a lot of heavy lifting with the open house, and so DPI is not.
No, and I can't see how they possibly could, but this is such a huge thing.
Yeah.
I look forward to some great things.
I think, how many, Wayne, do we have on the committee?
About 25, yeah, including outside agencies. Brady's on the committee, and Tom Ney from the county, and Joel Raker from the CBB, and Matt Ciafanua from New Scan. And so we've got a pretty good group of our partners as well that are involved in that planning group. In addition to that, the church will have a committee of about 15 that they are currently working on putting together. That will take responsibility for what happens inside the fence predominantly, although there'll be some overlap. And so we've established connections with that group and the temple department staff that will be supporting them. So I think we're making all the connections we need to ensure that it's a good cohesive effort.
downtown businesses are excited about that, and we are talking about it and kind of getting a game plan. I do have that, I think, up here on one of these later slides. Okay, so a quick kind of summary of my financials. I'm just talking about the second quarter. In these kind of 2 months that I've been here, we did raise $25,200. I was told kind of early on that it's just kind of a match grant, and you know, we definitely need to be responsible and kind of raising that money. This is where it came from: cash, membership fees, $14,700. Services in kind, I've got $3,500 from these three companies. Swire, Coca-Cola, they provide drink, tents, and printing services to us. $3,500 from Williamson and Burnley. They do graphic design as a graphic designer, so when I need something, he'll do it and kind of bill against that $3,500. And then Big Door Network, that video production company I was telling you about. We're making videos of all these downtown restaurants and businesses so they can get up on the website, and it'll be a good place for people to go to and find out, you know, what's downtown and what's going on downtown. Okay, here's some expenses for this quarter. Down here, I've kind of broken it up by month. Our payroll is about $8,000 a month, and that's a little bit higher than normal because we have three. It already is that we do have her in a paid internship. Events, we spend about $1,500 a month, mostly on our members on downtown businesses like our Lincoln Lunch, and other events like Play Street Provo. And I put just kind of miscellaneous expenses on here for domain name, credit card processing, hosting, etc. Okay, here's some of my priorities. Getting a really good, robust email list together. Right now we have about 700 emails, but most of those are businesses and our members. I'm trying to kind of reach out to the public and get the public involved and students involved, just so I have a way to market downtown businesses and downtown events. We're helping businesses convert event attendance into dollars, like I'm talking about with the rooftop concert series in the restaurants. We're getting a game plan together for the Provo City Temple open house, talking to the restaurants, just, you know, that particular week, have kind of flat rate meals, where, you know, there's 20 restaurants, and you know that you can go to each of those restaurants for $10, and just a way to, you know, encourage people while they're down here to eat downtown. We're building trust and offering value to downtown Provo members. We're actually doing things for them. We're making videos. We're giving them space on our website. We have targeted social media campaigns with their products or their food. and we create networking opportunities to foster growth. Our last Lincoln lunch, we invited a Yelp representative. Yelp is the online review company, and that was a really good kind of seminar that downtown businesses needed and enjoyed, and it was one of the high attended kind of Lincoln lunches that people have told me that, just because I haven't been here in the past, but people have told me that was a great Lincoln lunch and a good idea. We're trying to continue that trend. So that's my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions. Any questions you might have? Yeah.
So do you see that the networking opportunities, I know they used to keep track of likes on Facebook or the Downtown Provo app. Do you see growth from those? Are you going to continue to track that type of thing with social media to see if that's contributing to growth?
Yes. I think I did kind of put the Facebook numbers on there.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see that. Okay.
We're growing on Facebook about 200 per month.
Okay.
And on Instagram about 700 a month, or 350 a month, 700 total since they've been here. So we definitely are tracking those and growing those. And those particular ones are public, our public phase. We're kind of a unique. We're a chamber. We're a 501c6. We're a chamber of commerce, a business association. But we're kind of unique in the sense that we also have a public face. So we not only have to kind of keep the businesses networking, but we also kind of have to have a public face and grow and market to the public. And it's definitely a balance between those two. But I am totally focused on having a good public face and being a good place where people can come to from the public, come to my website and know that they can go there and find out what's going on, know that they can find a new restaurant that they've never been to, know that they can explore a new shop that they haven't been to. For example, on my website, on our website, when it's done, there's going to be an event calendar, a community event calendar. Not to take away from any other organization that has one like Provo City. They have a great calendar that always has an event, but this particular calendar is just downtown focused. If Lore's having, a new band play at their thing, at their venue, or if we're having Play Street Provo, if there's other events, any kind of downtown event will be on that particular calendar. So I am kind of focused on getting a good public face out there.
In the app, the
app, there's about 2,000 downloads on that. Okay. There's a new version coming August 3rd, so we're working hard with a partner to upgrade that app and to also keep it updated. The thing that always drives new visitors and engaged visitors is fresh content. So if it's not continually updated, you'll lose even the people who have downloaded it because it's all old and outdated. So yeah, there is a focus on that, and the new app will be coming out March or the beginning of August. So yeah.
I just have a little concern about. I appreciate you being here, Brady. First time we really got to have you report as a council, but I'm always concerned about loss of momentum. This is the third director in a few years, and it takes you a while as a director, my goodness sakes, to get your feet on the ground, to get to know the businesses.
Right.
I'd like a report sometime and saying what we can do to maintain some momentum and some stability in the organization.
Right.
If you have recommendations for that, I would really appreciate hearing those things so that we won't have to have the possibility of momentum loss.
Right. And I agree with you. It's tough when there is that, because this is so relationship based. I've kind of learned that there's kind of two types of people that I'm trying to meet. There's the type that, there's fresh blood here. I'm so excited. I'm excited. So that momentum stays. There's also that person that's like, I spent so much time and effort with the last director, and now all that, I'm going to have to reteach or relearn or kind of meet a whole new person where So yeah, I totally agree that is a concern. And I'll definitely keep that in mind and think about that and report back to you next time we meet.
Thank you. Gary, the lesson from the three thus far is each of them had distinct entrepreneurial interests. So perhaps in the future we should rule that out.
Well, thank you.
I'm glad mine was so bad.
We appreciate your update and presentation, and welcome you to the Downtown Provo Inc. organization. Look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Let's turn next to Phil Uhl and Stan Mashinsky for the GIS home mapping tool update presentation.
I apologize to Wayne and Corey. They just got this the other day. But
This is the coolest thing.
This is the good news is I don't want anything from you. I don't want any money. Don't want any appropriations, any additional taxes. I'm here to show you some tools that hopefully will be helpful to you and be helpful in your processes in making decisions. Because I'm the GIS administrator for the city. GIS stands for Geographic Information Systems. Think of it as computer map making. But the idea behind it is decision making and getting information out to others' hands. So what you're seeing right here, and I'm not sure how much time you'd like me to take.
10 minutes.
10 minutes? Okay. If any of you in the past have used an application, internal city application called GIS Web, that's been our map to date. Stan, our developer, he's been working on a new one called GIS Home. This is to replace the old one because the old one's technology is out of date. And this one is basically a supercharged version of the old one, so it's bigger and better and has lots of usefulness to it. What we've tried to do here is we've tried to create access to as much GIS data that the city has as possible. So for example, until GIS came along, utilities all worked on different maps. You had a map for your storm drain, you had a map for hard copy maps, a map for your water, a map for your sewer. This allows us to overlay layers of data and see all those utilities on the same map. First off, we've got the layer list. You see we just click right up there. These are, there's a lot hidden in this menu right here. You can see water, sewer. You can see there's a lot of sub-layers as well. Some of those have a check mark next to them, meaning they're turned on, and some of them don't, meaning they're not turned on yet. But as you zoom in, you can see these layers now overlaid on the map. One in particular that I'm sure will be of interest to you is this parcel layer right down here. This will allow you to query Utah County parcel information. Right up, you got all kinds of information you look at, including some market value numbers. This all comes straight from Utah County. And we also have at the top a link that goes directly to Utah County's website if you'd like to find out more about the property. The key thing to remember about this layer list, if you want to be able to click on the map and get information, which is one of the key and simplest things that this is good for, you have to have the layer turned on over here. So once you turn on the parcel layer, click, you'll bring up parcels. If you want to turn on parcels and zoning and council districts, and then click in a location, and it's literally drilling down through our data right there. What is real right there? You'll notice right up here we have a little arrow that might be a little bit hidden for you, but it will cycle through the different layers that you clicked on. So there you got information. I don't know if you realize we had all that information that we've been feeding out to people on you, but we do. Again, now this is an internal application. You might have noticed the login at the beginning. It's because while it is intended for city staff, it is available externally as well. It works with your Provo City login. So if you've forgotten your password or anything, just get someone to contact support and reset it for you. I don't know how often you use your city logins, but that's the login that you're using.
So you do have to have a Provo City account and log in.
You do. And the reason for that is utilities. We got some of that data is a bit sensitive.
I've ordered and logged in for all of you that don't have one. So.
All right. Base maps. Over here in the far right corner, base map is what we're talking about, the map that's in the background. Right now, it's just a basic street map. Okay, but you have several you can choose from, including several sets of aerial imagery. The latest we have is the 2013 county imagery. That's a live feed directly from Utah County. Internally, we've also provided the 2012 and 2009 and 2006 imagery and 2011. We've got some variation base maps here. Here's a topographic one if you want to look at some more of a topographic background. But that can help change it up and help in the process.
So one advantage of the previous years, you can look at a site and see if there's been changes over time.
Exactly. That was a big thing for our zoning officers, was to be able to think, oh, hey, you say you had this deck since 2006? Well, I don't think so. And you can look at it and see what changes happened.
And how far back does it go? Just to 09?
We had 2006 right here, and 2012 and 2009. There's 2011 right there. The state just contracted with Google to obtain their imagery on an annual basis. So we're expecting to be able to put some new, well, it's a little bit later 2013 imagery out there that we'll host ourselves. And sometime this year they'll be reflying our area. So as soon as that imagery is available, we can have it for free based on the state's contract. So we'll look for additions there in the future. Over here if you want to simply search for a feature, search for an address, you can also notice there's another little cue there, that little triangle indicates that there is more to this box than meets the eye. But you type something in, it'll give you some options. If you want to search on different attributes of different layers, like I'm sure none of you know what a transformer number is to search on, but that was a request from our power department. But you might know a parcel number. So you can come down and search based on parcel number. Or you search based on a street. So those are some features there. We do have some enhanced search capabilities right over in this area that you can explore, but probably won't go too far into those since we want to have some other bells and whistles to show you. The idea behind GIS and the power really behind it is you've got these features on a map, but each one of the features has a database of information behind it. And being able to symbolize and view that information and make it available is what makes it useful. What Stan's brought up here right now is our Street View tool. Click right there, and it taps into Google Street View. If you go full page, this is where things get really interesting. You got this regular map here, you got your Street View here. Now you might notice something different about this imagery right here. It's not the usual straight down or oblique imagery. It's taken at an angle, so you got about a 45-degree angle. You can see the facade of a building, and you can rotate around it, so you can see the north end, east end, west end, south end, and get a better idea of what's going on the property. Those imagery sources aren't coming from us, so we really can't tell you what the dates were. But you might find it useful rather than hopping in your car and going out to view the property. We got some draw tools on here that allow you to mark up your map. Also allow you to do some measuring and get some labels on there. Click the show measurement button right there. Now he's going to draw a new one and double clicks, and you can see it has a total of 1,181 feet. We also have a similar measuring tool, which is strictly for measuring, but it also puts features on the map as well. You see it's giving you that as well as a cumulative. So it gives you for each length, and then cumulative. And now he's going to the print dialog. And as most of you know, printing from a browser can be pretty sketchy. This simplifies it a bit because you can put it into a PDF. It's something a little more predictable. You can change some features here, including adding some text or putting in a legend. Once you hit print, it's going to churn away on that for a minute, and it's going to produce a PDF that can then be uploaded. You can then save it print it, email it. We've got it on a Provo City template. Some nice features down there. So we were happy to see that recently. It was just a couple days ago that we had the Utah County Marathon, and it was nice to see the police department had gotten a hold of this, and then we saw our little map right there in their newspaper article. So we're like, hey, that's right. So that's your print tool. That is kind of the quick tour, GIS Home. Again, it's gishome.provo.org is the URL at the top. This is, like I said, this is our internal, but also we do have some external applications available. We have maps.provo.org for citizens. The intention of that is for a citizen to go to their location, put in an address, and find out anything relevant to their home. From their representatives to the day they pick up the garbage to their parcel information, what school districts they're in. We also have our park finder where you can try to find a park based on the amenities it offers. And we also have our election night map, which should be of interest to this group. So,
Phil, so you said that you need a Provo account and log in to find access. But are some parts of the site only accessed through a certain, not all citizens can have access to all of the tools?
Yes, yeah. So if you don't have a Provo City login, you won't be able to get in.
This is an employee login.
Yeah, it's an employee login. So the maps.provo.org doesn't require anything,
Oh, I
of course,
see. Okay.
and neither does Park Finder or any election map. We also have a construction map, which has been working where the Public Works is putting out construction projects, and that's maps.provo.org/construction. Don't worry about all the URLs. I'll send you an email. Any questions? I know that was a kind of a whirlwind tour. Yeah.
Have you incorporated any of the census data?
We don't currently, but that question did come up from our economic development group, and we do probably rather than compile it ourselves, we might actually eventually tap into some census map services available on the internet, just kind of bring them in. But that is one of the things that others have brought up as well.
Currently, there are roughly 200 layers on there that you can turn on and off and mess around with.
So yeah, feel free to root around in this menu, and you might find something interesting here. One of my favorites is down below rezones. Worked on that for a lot of years. It's historical rezones. It's a really messy layer, not pretty to look at, but if you click on a location, it will show you zoning history back to 1994. So, and yeah, the order it came in. Okay. You're all sufficiently mesmerized.
There's also
since
it's available outside of our, outside of the city, you can view it on your tablets, your phones out there as well, and you can also click on this button right here below the home button, and it will track your location. It won't send us any information. It just puts your location on the map.
So the map follows you around as you drive around in the car and change your own location. That makes sense.
It doesn't send us anything.
Yeah, we're not tracking you. That question did come up. If you need any refreshers on any of this, or how-tos, or requests about data or anything else, please don't hesitate to call or email. We'll see what we can do. Okay. All right.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Phil and Stan. Very impressive. Appreciate your great work on this. Very useful.
Not often enough, apparently. Let me just say this, though. We go to different places in the state, and these guys are the best in the entire state. Honestly, I mean, people tell us this consistently. These guys are pros. They know exactly what they're doing. They're amazing. So
do your best to keep them.
That's right. You should have asked for money, Phil. Get back up here.
The appropriations part of it.
Yeah. All right, Mr. Dustin Wright, we'll turn to you next for the next two items, both related to properties generally located between 940 North and 800 North, the general plan map amendment, and the rezone discussion.
Thanks. So this parcel here that's outlined in red is a parcel that Intermountain Healthcare owns. Last year they went through the process of changing the general plan and doing some rezoning to get into the zone that the rest of their hospital campus was in, which is the healthcare facility zone. In the city, we like to make sure that the general plan matches what the zoning is going to be. So the first step you usually do is check the general plan. In this case, this was a parcel that got overlooked when all those other parcels were changed last year. So this is currently in the commercial designation on our general plan. And the proposal is to change it to the public facilities to allow for the rezoning to the healthcare facilities, which is a subzone of the public facilities zone. So it's 0.446 acres. It might have been mislabeled as 2.64, which is for the part here. These parcels outlined in red that are going to be changed, or are recommended to be changed to the rezoning. So this piece here is just this area right here for the general plan to get it into conformance. So it's just shown there, and this is the area that will be rezoned, and these parcels that have the lines through them are the areas that will be proposed to be rezoned to the healthcare facilities zone. There. So there's a few more properties down in this area that the hospital hasn't acquired yet, but the ones that they have right now currently are being proposed for this rezone. So all the properties that they own will essentially be in the same zone as the remainder of the hospital.
Why are we not taking in those that they don't own right now? I mean, they still have a use. I mean, they have a non-conforming use, but if we really know, why are we holding out those two?
On the parcels that they don't own, a year ago we changed the general plan for the public facilities designation. We didn't change the zone at that time just because IEC didn't own them. But in the future, if they do acquire them, they could come back in and have those rezoned to the healthcare facility zone. So that's their plan. If they're able to acquire those, would be at that point to rezone those. And since the general plan has already been changed for that whole area, just except for this piece, then they won't have to go through that process. The general plan will just be the rezone.
Okay.
So it's good.
Any other questions? So Dustin, that was the first item, right? Or did you cover both?
Yeah, I've got both,
okay.
the general plan and the.
Okay, and those are scheduled for our July 7th council meeting. Okay, the general plan for the one and the zoning for as well. Yep. All right, great. Thank you, Dustin. Next, we have one of our planners, Austin Corey, who will present a discussion on a request to amend Provo City Code Sections listed here to modify the front yard parking requirements for one-family residential dwellings throughout the city.
Okay, thank you. So this really came about, it was proposed originally by a neighborhood chair that there was a series of enforcement cases that were open in a particular area that included a lot of some of the smaller kind of post-World War II homes. And what happens in a lot of these areas is they have kind of tight setbacks and these, like I mentioned, the smaller homes. And by today's livability standards, they're pretty meager in maybe the square footage of that home. So one of the least expensive ways for someone to expand their living space is to convert their garage. So they would close off the garage door, build it into living space, and then continue there. But the way that our ordinance reads right now is that you're not allowed to park in your front yard unless that parking is leading to a garage or a carport. The intent of that is to kind of keep the areas, here's a good example right there of one of those areas. So what you can see is this was the old garage door. They basically framed that in and created living space. Now, that made the parking of that car in the driveway illegal. The intent of the ordinance was basically to kind of help neighborhoods maintain a visual character and an aesthetic to the area. It would also help encourage landscaping in the front yards and things like that. So as what's been happening, this is actually one of the homes on the streets that really spurred the intent, but as the neighborhood chair, Mr. McCord, came in to do this, he wanted to approach this subject from a more holistic standpoint that would apply citywide, because this isn't the only small geographic area that this kind of a circumstance sits in, where the people are really looking for a way to expand their living space. And so in an attempt to try and help them in a reasonable way, we went through some various iterations with Mr. McCord as well. And so the amendment that is actually in front of you is what's been generated between that coordination with him and staff. So it's been reviewed pretty heavily through planning and the other city departments as well. But I don't know if any of you have had an opportunity yet to read the actual amendment that is being proposed, but there is one change that's occurred since Planning Commission. When we went to Planning Commission about this, they were a little bit unsure about a couple items and just wanted some things further clarified. The first was whether or not a basement was included in that square footage calculation or not. And the other was, what if somebody's just a couple square feet over or under? The amendment that we're basically proposing is allowing somebody to convert their garage if they have a small home that the setbacks aren't sufficient to be able to actually create a side entry or a rear entry garage and be able to get driveway access back there. They're really constrained in what they're even allowed to do. So we tried to spell those out, and one of the limitations we made on that was that the main floor of the dwelling be 1,000 square feet or less, and that number comes from kind of some old historic zoning minimum square footage requirements in a lot of the zones. So that's where that came from, but the Planning Commission was a little bit concerned that, you know, what if somebody's 1,050 square feet? Do we really want to draw that line right there? And so they asked that a 10% contingency be added in. So I believe this has been sent to you in the ordinance amendment. You'll see there's a couple areas that are highlighted. Those are the additional amendments that have occurred since Planning Commission. So,
Corey, that 1,000-foot requirement, that's before the garage conversion.
Correct. Original construction square footage, and we can be able to track those when it comes to zoning enforcement, things like that. They should be able to track those through building permits of what that original square footage was and know how big those additions were made.
Is that called the Tapahi Amendment?
Might have had something to do with that.
Just kind of a random construction question. Is it the same whether you're building on a cement slab as opposed to foundation? If you're just building on like a carport slab, is that the same structurally? As if we're encouraging, I mean, we're going to be encouraging people kind of to do this if we're allowing it, right? So is that, how does that matter?
Well,
do you, Mr. Construction,
if you want to answer that, feel free.
I don't know.
The garage should be built under code so that the frost barrier, which is the reason for your footing and your foundation, would be there anyway. So let's do that up the house. Now, if it wasn't built to standard originally, then it might have an impact.
Yeah, and carports basically have different loading requirements, so they might end up being a little bit different, but that should be something that's worked through in the building permit process. If they come in for a building permit to enclose a carport, obviously those kind of things should be checked out and verified that it's okay to even build the way that they're proposing to build, so.
That's not what
Pick
we're
it up
really
later.
discussing, but it just occurred to me, I wondered. So.
Apparently, part of Mr. McCord's rationale, in the original rationale, was this amendment would likely promote owner occupancy. Are there data to support that?
I don't know that we have some really firm data necessarily that would just really speak to this. But the idea behind it is that if somebody can increase their living space, they're more likely to actually stay there. The really small homes, if they're starting to be kind of run down, very often what we do see is they become rentals and things because nobody really wants to live there long term. So by allowing them to expand the living space, it makes it a little more livable and a little more likely that they would stay as an owner because they enjoy the space. But as far as firm data, I'm not aware of any research that would necessarily back that.
Thank you.
So the on-street parking would then, they'd be allowed? I can't remember how it reads.
So this isn't
Could be
about
allowed-
on-street parking.
I know, but if they can't park, they can only park one car
so-
in front of their enclosed carport.
Yes, let me point out basically the highlights of the way that the amendment spells it out. Basically, right now, the requirement in any of your R1 zones, and let's remember this is only talking about single-family detached residential zones. This does not apply to any other zoning, nothing with commercial or anything like that. The first, it's kind of hard to see what's highlighted in red there, but it removes a covered parking requirement. Currently, anything R110 and higher has to have 2 covered parking spaces, which is usually done in a garage or a carport. It removes that requirement, and the required parking can be located. That's one phrase that's added in there is on a driveway. By definition, the driveway is a hard surface improvement. So you'll see later on in those graphic images that it doesn't open the door to parking on your lawn, for instance.
Right,
But
I
if
did
you
see that
actually
one,
improve
but-
and build an area, you
So they have to build a cement slab to park on?
right.
An extra one somewhere.
Cement or asphalt is basically how it
But
is, right?
but not to park on the street. It doesn't, they're not allowed to
Right,
just
it-
park their cars on the street then, rather than,
Yeah, so that basically opens it up to allow them to park. The way the restriction reads right now is they just can't park in that setback area. So if your home's set back 20 feet, you can't have a car in there, period. And so this is basically saying, okay, well, but if you meet these certain circumstances where your square footage is small enough and everything like that, when you meet those certain circumstances, we'll allow you to build an area that you can park your cars, because we want people to be able to park and live at their residences.
and I saw somewhere in there where it said as long as it's not 50% cement or something, your front yard has to be at least 50% landscape.
Yeah, so let's keep going through this, and I can point that out as well. So this is the old amendment that's in front of you. So as it gets down to this next paragraph, it mentions located in front of the dwelling. We added the term a one-story dwelling. That doesn't apply if they're 2 stories, because oftentimes if it's a 1,000 square foot footprint, that means somebody has a 2,000 square foot home. That, in our minds, is very livable, not necessarily in line with what we're trying to achieve here. And then there was this just another line in that same paragraph added on. It's line number 28. So just behind this, it mentions when determining the square footage, a 10% contingency is allowed. And then we did add in this paragraph B that mentions that they have to meet the parking design standards, which determine your dimensions that you have to fit in and things like that, to make sure that they can't just claim that they're fitting that many parking stalls on. You actually have to really provide that off-street parking. And then not being allowed to exceed 3 total spaces. And then this goes to where the question that you're asking about as well, with that 50% lot coverage requirement. We took and analyzed most of these areas where these problems are occurring, and how people are parking and what kind of space they actually need. And in most of these areas, they have to cover about 50%, and the current restriction is 35%. You can't have any more than 35% impermeable surface in your front yard. So that's why that change occurred, was actually to open the door for these driveways to be poured in dimensions that could actually hold 3 spaces, which is the off-street parking requirement for a single-family residence. So that's section 1437 when that goes, but because of the effect this has on others, there's also 1410-120 where that 50% requirement was added in, and 1410-130 where there's basically just another statement about not allowing parking in the front yard, and we just took that out and said it can't be any closer than the main dwelling unless it meets these requirements. So that's the essence of what the amendment itself is. Ryan, if you want to scroll down to these pictures, this might help clarify a little bit more as well. So this first image, this would currently is non-conforming because that garage has been converted and they're parking in the front. This amendment would allow this to occur. The next image would be the same situation. It's pretty dark to see, but the garage is converted. They can go ahead and park on this driveway, and they're okay to do that. This
Question,
image.
Corey, on the parking, now how many do they need to be able to park?
So a single-family residence has to fit 3 off-street parking spaces.
But if you back up to those images, it doesn't seem like.
Maybe Austin, correct me if you see it differently, but one of the issues here is we have non-conforming parking standards in these neighborhoods. So when these houses were constructed 40 years ago, 50 years ago, they may have only required 1 or 2 spaces. So one, I'm not sure how you're dealing with that non-conformity and whether you view that as we're lessening the degree of non-conformity or we're just shifting where the non-conformity lies.
Yeah, well, so if it's an actual legal non-conforming right that they have less spaces than the 3, then that will continue. This doesn't necessarily resolve that in any way, but it wouldn't change otherwise.
So some of these, they may have only have 1 legal parking spot to begin with. And so,
or probably 2.
You probably 2, but so what you're doing is sort of allowing them to shift the location of some of those legal parking spots by enclosing these garages.
Right.
Well, and it looks like they're parking on the sidewalk and on the grass anyway. If some of the other visions or other the other pictures, one shows them parking on the grass. This one's parking on the sidewalk, or at least the edge of the side. I mean, so parking could be an issue, maybe.
Right, and in this instance, that would actually, this amendment would then open the door so that if this individual is enforced on for parking on the sidewalk, he has an avenue that's not illegal for him to actually provide a space for him to park that vehicle on.
It doesn't look like that vehicle would fit in the parking lot or in the parking spot without going over the sidewalk, which is illegal. So they would have to pour another pad somewhere on the front yard,
right,
as long as it wasn't more than 50% to be legal.
Exactly.
So
the idea isn't to open everything up to just kind of allow it all. It's to give specific criteria that we're okay if that parking occurs there, so that we don't. If we open it up too far, it can really detract from the character of the neighborhood.
Oh, and that's, I guess, my thought is if you have cars parking like this, on the sidewalk and on the grass and everywhere, it's not really a family-friendly environment, I guess, for walking and biking and doing all the things that kids do. So it'd be interesting just to see it firsthand. I guess I'm having a hard time picturing where this is exactly. So
this is 80 South.
8 South?
80
Oh,
South.
80 South. And
it's just barely on the west side of the I-15 corridor. I can't remember exactly. I think it's between 100 and 200 or so. But, yeah, but it's just barely past that I-15 corridor, just across under on Center Street. So going through these again.
So just to clarify, look at that picture real quick. in some ways that statement's not completely accurate. Amendment would make property compliant. If they have 2 required parking spots, they're going to have to extend that pad out to allow for a second parking spot in that front yard, so long as it doesn't cover 50%.
Well, in that regard, yes, but as far as, now this is only to discuss whether it's legal or not legal to even park in the front yard, period.
Oh,
So,
I understand,
so it would
but as
become
you go through the
compliant at that
process
part.
to say, yes, you can enclose your carport, but you still require 2 spaces, one of the outcomes might be to, okay, where do you put that second required space?
Yeah, and for the future, it would be easier to do that now through the building permit processes. In the past, sometimes in building permit, they've even made them rip out driveways to make sure that they're not going to park there and things like that. But so I think, yes, that's something you'd work through as long as a permit was actually pulled to do it.
So the intent of this ordinance is not to reduce the amount of required parking.
Correct.
Whether it's conforming or non-conforming.
So just the last image on this, I think, gives us an example of some properties that wouldn't necessarily become compliant by this, just so that it's, so this is one. There's no hard surface area down there, and they're also parking too close to the front entry. It does have a statement in here that they're not allowed to park directly in front of the main entry to the building. And then the very next one. So this one would become compliant as in the fact that they can park on that driveway that's now no longer leading to a garage or a carport, but the carport itself that's now been added onto that is not compliant because that's encroaching on the setbacks, and we're not changing anything as far as structural requirements to the setbacks. It's just about if they can put their car there or not. Are there any other questions?
All right, thank you, Austin. We'll look forward to taking this up in our next council meeting. Finally, back to you, Dustin, on the discussion on a request to amend Provo City Code Section 14.34.285 regarding driveway access and orientation of homes for corner lots.
Thank you. So the first part of this ordinance amendment is to remove some of the wording that's regulating how multifamily developments can be located on a lot. And the reason behind this is a lot of our lots, especially the infill, which is areas within the city that's already kind of built out, and there's just some remaining vacant land or property that's maybe more ripe for redevelopment. Some of these lots are not your standard shape, and so we've had some issues, I guess, in the past where this part of the ordinance just kind of makes that difficult for these projects to be able to be designed in a way that meets the character of the neighborhood. A lot of the single-family neighborhoods where some of these could be permitted based on prior occupancy allowance for that specific property are on like pretty narrow lots, and so the way the ordinance reads now is that some of these multifamily projects should be spread out along the length of the frontage along the street, as opposed to allowing them to have some of the interior part of that lot to be able to be developed as well. And so the first part of that is just to remove that. We currently do still require that those structures are oriented towards the street, that the main entrance is facing the street, and that's to give the effect that even in these neighborhoods where those are located, that they still kind of fit in with the character of the neighborhood. So the intent is still there, and just further allows those infill projects to be able to be more creative in the interior part of those parcels. The second part of this ordinance amendment is to add Section C, which is to essentially give Planning Commission more flexibility when a new subdivision plat comes before them, when it's adjacent to a collector or an arterial street, to be able to determine which way that house should face. And that's not always something that matters, but in some cases it has come up where the Planning Commission has wanted to be able to say, let's have this home orient their front towards this street, and for whatever reason that might be, that makes the most sense for that specific development. And since all these subdivisions and lots are all different configurations and stuff, there's a lot of opportunities where we can make it more aesthetically pleasing to be able to have that requirement placed on that specific lot to say, let's orient it in this direction. Some examples that we see on these collector streets is they'll just orient the rear of the home towards these collector streets because there's a requirement code that doesn't allow for the driveways to back out onto collector and arterial streets. So you see this a lot where they just back the homes up to those streets, and you just get this wall of fence that's not that aesthetically pleasing to walk along. Another part of it is to add some flexibility as well. So if it is required that on a lot that say a corner lot that's adjacent to a collector arterial street, that if they're required to orient it to a specific orientation on that there's some flexibility. The Planning Commission can reduce the setback for the front yard to be up to, or not to be less than 10 feet, which gives them a little more flexibility on a lot that might be more narrow. And if they had to face a certain way, they'd have a less of a yard. So that's kind of the basic idea of this ordinance amendment, is to help in those situations where it makes more sense to have a home face a certain way, but currently there's not a mechanism for us to be able to have that be a requirement, and it's just left up to the developer. So this will be for new developments and subdivisions that take place.
As I look at your picture on Columbia Lane, I don't particularly like that wall fence, but I'm not sure I want to be a person that's backing out onto that. I know when we're backing out on University Avenue, it becomes a bit of a challenge at times.
Yeah.
So how are we?
So what you can see here would be that you require them to face Columbia Lane, and that they have, say, like an alleyway behind, so that they can access a garage from behind the property. So you don't have the fence along the street face.
So they face, but then how do they access back onto the street though? How do they come out? I don't understand.
They would access the alleyway behind their property.
Oh, access coming in, and so they really don't drive in and out. All they do is face. Okay.
Yeah, because our ordinance doesn't allow
access onto those streets.
Developments to have driveways fronting on them. There's specific cases where the city engineer could allow that, but typically it's not allowed to.
I think one of some really good examples of how this is happening under current development would be up in the Daybreak community, where they do face homes on collector roads, but they access their property through an alleyway.
Independence Avenue down on next to Louis, that's how they do it.
So I'm not sure at the point where we want to say that emphatically, that on collector and arterial roads, you have to face into the arterial collector, you have to have an alley in back. That's why the language is written the way it is, so that there's flexibility. Look at the situation and see what makes sense in that situation. It's not mandatory that you have to do that. The other big issue is maintenance. That's not typical what you see there. Usually there's a park strip also and sidewalk in front of that fence. And in Provo City, property owners are required to maintain that park strip and that sidewalk. If you live in the middle of that block and you're supposed to maintain that park strip and that sidewalk on the other side of the fence, are many people going to walk all the way around that fence to do that maintenance, to shovel that shovel that walkway, or mow the park strip? They're probably not. So if there's ways that we can manipulate the direction of the house to help address that issue and make it an easier maintenance situation for the property owner, we'd like to be able to do that. So this opens the door to give the planning commission that flexibility, but nothing is mandatory as far as this is the policy now, and darn it, the developers are going to do it this way. We want that flexibility.
Drive up North Geneva Road or Canyon Road, you'll see a number of newer developments where this is a pretty common issue.
All right, thank you, Dustin. Are there any administrative updates, Mr. Parker or Mr. Moon?
Not today.
All right. If not, Mr. Jones?
Yes, there has been a closed session requested. I will just, for the record, go over quickly the reasons why a closed session may be held. You're familiar with these, but there are 4 primary reasons that apply to City Council at least. One is for discussion of the character, professional competence, or physical and mental health of an individual. Another is for strategy sessions to discuss pending or reasonably imminent litigation. Third is strategy sessions to discuss purchase, exchange, or lease of real property. And, well, if public discussion would disclose the appraisal or estimated value and or prevent the public body from completing the transaction on the best possible terms. And the fourth is strategy sessions to discuss the sale of real property. That has the same criteria as purchase of property. However, I'll point out, as I have before, that it has an additional criteria that the closed session may only be held if the public body has previously given public notice that the property would be offered for sale. So there's several topics actually that have been requested to be addressed. To the best of my knowledge, they fall within those categories. So we'll make sure we follow those principles in the closed meeting. But it'd be appropriate this time for a motion to close the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Motion to close the meeting. Made by Mr. Miller, seconded by Ms. Hales. Those in favor? Great, thank you.
Yes.